Councillor Vanderstelt.
Present.
Councillor Sless.
Present.
Councillor Martin.
Here.
Mayor Davis.
Here.
Councillor Wall.
Present.
Councillor Van Tilborg.
Here.
Councillor Carpenter.
Here.
Councillor McCreary.
Here.
Councillor Utley.
Here.
Councillor Weaver.
Present.
Councillor Antosky.
Here. Thank you. We've got 4 delegations this evening, and first of all, I would just remind everyone we've got a very full agenda tonight. So let's try and move this through efficiently and fairly. So our first delegation is Duncan Ross from Brant Waterways Foundation. Duncan, if you'd like to come forward, please. And Duncan, you're an old hat at this. You know you've got 10 minutes, and if you can introduce yourself for the clerk.
Through the chair, I'd like to thank council for the opportunity to be here this evening. I'll be really quick and I think pretty light agenda for us. I'd like to, first of all, my name is Duncan Ross. I'm the past president with the Brant Waterways Foundation and the current chair of our Trail Improvement and River Access campaign. I'd like to recognize my colleagues that are with me here today. Stephanie Hermans is our current president with the foundation, and Barb Wright is our board coordinator. So I think everybody's fairly familiar with the Brant Waterways Foundation. Over the last 31 years, we've donated over $5 million in the community to projects that protect, preserve, restore, and improve the river and its adjacent lands here in Brantford, Brant County, and Six Nations. So we've done lots of great work in the community on the trails and improving the river and obviously the associated environment around that. We're really thrilled to be in the midst of a $1 million fundraising campaign that is going to be going until November 1st of this year. So we're thrilled to have a lead donation from Margot and Paul Williamson of $100,000 and further commitments of $500,000 at this point in time, and we're continuing to work towards that $1 million number. So we're here this evening, as you probably have seen in the report from staff there, that what we're looking for is obviously to give you guys some money, to give the city some money for projects that fit within our mandate, but also in recognition of those donations, to have some space within the trails that we would be able to recognize all of our donors. So down at Waterworks is a particular location that is noted in there. We've identified a number of projects in consultation with staff that we would like to fund that fit within our mandate and that are in the 10-year capital campaign. So we're really excited all about that. I would like to thank staff for all their work meeting with us. I know that they're very busy, so we always appreciate their time in identifying those projects. We also met with the community. That was a really big aspect of putting this fundraising campaign together, to understand what the various user groups of the trails and the community itself wanted to see. So we met with various hiking groups and cycling naturalists. We met with RTO and other government agencies to understand what's happening and developed a package of projects that we're looking to fund. So we're very excited for that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you may have any.
Welcome, Duncan, and thanks for your work as president. Now you're past president. These projects that we talk about with Kira, they're based upon both the county and the city's capital projects. What we've decided is what is a priority for us. So it's important that we maintain those capital projects in order to the fundraising that you're doing to help fundraise towards those projects.
Absolutely, yeah. The beauty, I think, over the years of the Brant Waterways Foundation is that we fundraise and we kind of have money ready to assist those projects that you're looking to do anyways. And obviously with financial constraints, we can't always get to all of those with the budget that we have. And we're happy to come in there and assist with some funding in those situations to be able to speed those projects along. And that's exactly what we're looking at here, is projects that have been identified that we would like to get to, but maybe don't have the financial resources right away, and that's where we can step in to assist with that.
And so the people that donate to the Tier project, they know that list of basket of projects. They don't know which one's going to be done first or when, but they realize they're supporting their funds towards those projects.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, we've
and whether we move one forward or ahead or back, as long as we keep those capital projects, we're keeping our word both on waterways and as a city.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, we've always worked in partnership with our municipal partners in order to identify those projects and to work on. So if something changes, then obviously we rely on staff to be able to assist us with that and letting us know the priorities. But yeah, our funders, they are not identifying specific projects in this particular situation.
And thanks for the work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a question, just a thank you for all you do, Duncan, you and the foundation, because we wouldn't have the trail system and the waterfront that we have without folks like you. You kind of take care of all the things we wish we could do, but we simply don't have the wherewithal to do it, and you folks go out and create that, and we're deeply indebted, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thanks, Duncan. Before we move on, I was remiss in asking for conflicts of interest. Do we have any conflicts of pecuniary interest at the table? Seeing none, we'll proceed. 4.2, Ken Burns, Chair of the Environmental Policy Advisory Committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of Council for the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Ken Burns, as you know, and I'm the chair of the Environmental Policy Advisory Committee, or EPAC as it's commonly known. In developing the proposal before you tonight regarding the modernization of the committee's mandate, EPAC has consulted with the Clerk's Department and the CAO's office, and their suggestions have all been incorporated into the final version that you received, I think, today from the CAO's office. So that's what I'm here to talk about. In today's world, it's commonly understood that the environment and the economy are inextricably linked, and they cannot be considered apart from each other. The fundamental concept of sustainable development, which is generally defined as human development goals, meeting human development goals while simultaneously sustaining the ability of our natural systems to provide the natural resources and ecosystem services upon which the economy and the society depend. And this is what we mean when we talk about municipal sustainability in the proposed mandate. As a city and as a society, this concept of sustainable development has modernized how we look at the environment. And this is what EPAC is proposing to recognize through this modernization of its mandate, providing advice to Council through the lens of the environment in the context of municipal sustainable development or municipal sustainability. As the conversation around the environment and sustainable development has grown, so have Council's expectations of EPAC. Beyond making recommendations and giving advice on environmental policy issues, Council has asked EPAC to play an increasingly active role in broader and more technical range of initiatives. For example, Council has tasked EPAC with collecting the necessary data and making recommendations on targets to advance Brantford within the FCM Partners for Climate Change program. We've been asked to assess the feasibility of Brantford participating in the Municipal Natural Capital Initiative, providing input on the development of the Corporate Energy Management Plan, developing a community-based action plan for Clean Brantford, working with staff in the exploration of dedicated stormwater funding models, and much more. As you can see, in addition to playing a more active role, the scope of the initiatives in which Council has sought EPAC's involvement is not solely limited to the environment, but truly reflects a more modern approach to the broader concept of the environment and municipal sustainability. And that's what's really, looking at that list of things, is really what led us to realizing that our mandate has simply gotten out of sync over time. Under the current mandate, Council directed EPAC to conduct research and assist in the development and maintenance of an environmental plan, while what used to be called an environmental plan has become, in today's world, an integrated community sustainability plan. And so we've reflected this in the modernization of the mandate. It's not something new, it's just the current term for what we were already working on, and at Council's direction, we've been working on researching this for the last few years. The proposed mandate includes promoting and undertaking educational and research and outreach initiatives related to the mandate of the committee. This would encompass initiatives like Clean Brantford, which Council asked EPAC to take the lead on. In order to advance the community conversation on Clean Brantford, EPAC launched the Canada Day Waste Diversion Initiative, which has been incredibly successful at engaging the public in improving waste diversion behavior and habits, as well as increasing our community understanding of the benefits and opportunities for increased waste diversion in our community. I'd be remiss at this point if I didn't take a minute to express EPAC's appreciation for Council's support last March in facilitating that important initiative. I'm proud to report that with Council's support to purchase the appropriate bins, the amount of community engagement and excitement that was generated this past July was exponentially greater than last year, not to mention the significant increase in our waste diversion. So on behalf of EPAC, thank you. I look forward to the opportunity to actually report in much more detail on that to Council in the near future. EPAC also recognizes, and I think it really goes without saying in today's political landscape, that municipal budgets are increasingly strained. As such, we can foresee the need and opportunity for EPAC to do fundraising to support these efforts. And as we discovered through the Canada Day initiative, there's a lot of support in the business community for these kind of initiatives. As you know from your briefing materials, it was the suggestion of the Clerk's Department that any change to permit fundraising by a committee should be made corporately rather than on a case-by-case basis. A similar impact of the budget strain on other committees can reasonably be anticipated, so it only makes sense to modernize the corporate policy as a whole on this issue. Accordingly, EPAC is asking Council to direct staff to explore what changes would be necessary to permit committees to raise funds to support their mandate and bring this information back to Council for its consideration. EPAC's role has always been to provide advice to Council on behalf of the community, and that's not changing. However, as the advice and input the Council is seeking from EPAC continues to grow, so does our need to engage the broader community to provide that advice and to provide the outreach and educational events which are so vital to having a vibrant conversation on improving the environmental sustainability within our community. However, none of this changes the fact that EPAC is and will continue to be at its core an advisory committee to Council. At first blush, some of you may have thought that the proposed changes were aimed at increasing independence or authority for EPAC, but in reality, and as I hope you've heard, nothing could be further from the truth. EPAC is simply proposing to modernize its mandate to work more effectively and efficiently and to better reflect the work that EPAC is doing for Brantford and at the direction of Council. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Ken. I've got Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ken, thank you for your presentation and all that you and your committee do for this community. Two questions. One, the FCM funds up to $125,000. Is there a deadline date to make a submission for that fund?
I think you might be referring to something else. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Councillor Utley. I'm sorry.
It's for the climate change officer.
Right. So that's a grant that the city, the climate change officer grant is one the city already applied to and received that grant. And we've hired Rochelle Rumney in that position.
I didn't read it like that. Anyhow, that's good news.
It is good news.
Secondly,
very good news. You'll see that in our policy too, because we'd like Rochelle.
You mentioned about the waste bins, the litter bins. I know it's not directly related to this, but can you quickly tell us how much was diverted on Canada Day and other events from going to the landfill?
Absolutely. So on Canada Day, we conducted a waste audit. We got far more engagement with the public as a result of having the appropriate bins for it. And we saw that reflected in the numbers and the data analysis. So we were able to divert 57% of the waste from Canada Day in total overall by volume, which is huge. That's compared to roughly 27% last year and 0% the year before. So it was very, very significant. We had a total of about 4,700 pounds of waste. So we're talking significant amount, and in terms of size, even more when you look at recycling. We also saw a much greater participation in recycling and much less recycling in the litter, which for Clean Brantford, we're happy to see. So those would be the highlights from my perspective.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Got no other speakers. Oh, this is Councillor Carpenter.
How would the recommendations in the report make the committee more accountable to the city council?
I think that the committee remains accountable to the council. There's nothing that changes that in the
Is there some things
proposal that
in
we
there that
put.
suggest that you will do things that will not allow, that don't require you to come back to council for approval? Education, outreach, those sorts of things?
I think that it's putting those educational and outreach, the purpose of the mandate, and when you look at the purpose of the committee remains to be an advisory committee of council. What it does do is it includes, rather than limiting the committee to simply providing advice, it includes within the scope of the work that we might undertake being able to do those promotional and educational initiatives within the committee, but it would certainly be the intention to continue to report to council and to continue to work within the mandate directed by council.
Educational, that outreach, none of that will be needed to be approved by council, or what those programs would be?
I think that looking at the mandate that council has given us, that is the same thing. So there's no desire to change that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burns. Next, we have 4.3. We've got Phil Gillies, Downtown Young Business Improvement Area.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, members of council. Pleased to appear this evening on behalf of the Downtown Young Business Improvement Area, to which I'm a consultant, to speak about the Brantford Downtown Outreach Team Initiative. I first became aware of the recent growing concerns in Brantford with the situation downtown with the Globe and Mail article of February the 3rd, entitled Brantford's Tim Hortons, the toll and opioid crisis is in full view, and a series of articles that followed thereafter. As the Downtown Young BIA has considerable experience in dealing with drug, crime, and street involvement issues, I reached out to Councillor Weaver, who was quoted in the stories in the Globe and Mail, about the establishment of the Brantford Downtown Outreach Team. This led to a meeting downtown here at Harmony Square. I brought down Pauline Larson, the Senior Economic Development Manager at Downtown Young BIA, and we met with Mayor Davis, MPP Will Bauma, a number of you members of council, and a city staff contingent headed up by Director Aaron Wallace. Pauline took the group through the initiatives Downtown Young has spearheaded under its safe and inclusive streets strategy. While Toronto is one of the most livable cities in North America and comparatively safe when compared to many other world cities, downtown Toronto has seen the issues of homelessness, panhandling, drug involvement, and street involvement become a growing concern in recent years. To be clear, when we talk about social issues, we're talking about a variety of individual issues at the street level, including street homelessness, mental health, addictions, and other street involvement. I won't take you through the Toronto strategy now in the limited time that I have, but I can send it to any members of council who would like to review it. It does include providing downtown stakeholders with tools, techniques, and information that help create a collective and more effective response. What I would say now is the following. The model that you are implementing with the Brantford Downtown Outreach Team is a good model and reflects the best practices in dealing with these issues. We, Downtown Young, feel that you have an excellent chance of success, in part because of scale. Your problems, while serious, should be containable, as the number of individuals with whom you're interacting are not into the many thousands as they are in Toronto, but also because your team has shown a willingness to cooperate and work together without issues of turf protection and differing priorities becoming evident. Frankly, Toronto could learn from your multidisciplinary approach and your lack of siloing. I would urge you to keep in mind that your approach should not just be to the benefit, that your approach should be to the benefit of all who live, work, and learn downtown and shop downtown, not just the street-involved individuals. Everyone deserves to be safe, and your downtown deserves to thrive to the benefit of all, including the vulnerable population. We said at the February meeting, your health and social workers and police have to be on the same page. If they are not working in tandem and pulling in the same direction, your chances for success are reduced. And that is based on our experience in downtown Toronto. Building relationships between the police and the people is important, but people should be aware that if you break the law, you will be arrested. There have to be consequences for one's actions. In Toronto, there has from time to time been confusion about what will get you arrested and what won't. This is not helpful. Do keep in mind the broken window theory. This is the criminological theory that states that visible signs of crime, antisocial behavior, and civil disorder create an urban environment that encourages further crime and disorder. So if you allow graffiti, trash, and drug paraphernalia to collect on the streets, the situation will get worse. I did notice, to be very frank, when we toured downtown in February, that many of the street waste bins were overflowing and some garbage was collecting on the ground underneath them. It may have just been a particular circumstance on that particular day, but I would urge you to try and devote the necessary resources to make sure this doesn't happen. Finally, we recommend you document the situation as you go forward. Take pictures of the state of your sidewalks, streets, and alleys. Keep track of the reported incidents and record anecdotal evidence. Downtown Yonge keeps an album as part of a record of the ongoing situation. You will need to be able to report progress to your stakeholders and to the community so that they can see the funds you have devoted to this effort are bearing fruit. And if the situation is worsening, you want a record of that too. I might add that having a good record of what's going on can also be useful when you're talking to senior levels of government about possible assistance. In conclusion, Downtown Yonge BIA wishes you well in your efforts. We remain at your disposal if we can provide any help or advice going forward. I remember as a child growing up in Brantford when downtown was the heart of the community and the gathering place for people from all parts of the city. It can and should be that again. Thank you, Madam Chair. Pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gillies. I've got Mayor Davis.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So first of all, Mr. Gillies, I wanted to thank you for having participated in and helped arrange the tour that took place early this year. I think it was very helpful for me and the other councillors that attended. And I think we have, because of that, we've adopted some of the best practices from the downtown organization in Toronto. But I found it interesting, you mentioned the issue of broken windows, the issue of enforcement and working with the police services, and how there is some confusion in Toronto as to what will lead to those actions and what won't. Can you have any advice for us based on your experience in Toronto with respect to that factor?
Yes, Mayor Davis. Some 4 years ago now, I guess, I was tasked by Mayor John Tory to act as secretary of his social housing task force. And we spent 14 months doing a very exhaustive study of the situation with Toronto community housing. What we found was there were efforts in place to support people with drug addictions and other vulnerabilities. But there was insufficient attention being paid to the impacts that their behaviors could have on their neighbors. I toured, well, our chair was Senator Art Eggleton. Senator Eggleton and I toured over 70 public housing buildings that year, and we heard time and time again that having one drug distribution center or one crack house in an apartment building of 100 units could ruin the tenancy experience for all 100 tenants. So I would urge you to keep in mind that the rights and the needs of the vulnerable population, but also the rights to a happy tenancy, a good life of the people who live next to them. Beyond that, I've seen I know that you've spoken, Mayor Davis, and in the media about supervised injection sites. And I absolutely support SISs in principle. They save lives. I think they're necessary. But some are much more successful than others. To drop an SIS into a less than optimal location with a lack of wraparound services can cause considerable disruption in the neighborhood. I don't want to particularly finger point right now about a situation we have in downtown Toronto. Suffice it to say, there's an SIS operating right in between a major university and a shopping and tourism hub. It's in the wrong place. It needs to be moved, and it needs wraparound services. Last thought on that is, with several of the SISs I have experience with in Toronto, the public health people who do a great job inside, triaging and doing the best they can to save lives, they tend to feel that their responsibility for the center ends at the door. And there's a lot that goes on outside that door that can have considerable impacts on the neighborhood. Certainly, it has been the case that Toronto Police Service aren't always sure what they are supposed to do just outside the door of an SIS, because they have been known to come into conflict with the public health officials. You really need everybody working on the same page.
Through you, Madam Chair, besides that issue, the other issue of, because you mentioned generally that the approach in Toronto, it's actually quite similar to my own personal approach, which is helping those who need help, but making it clear that there are certain rules in respect to behavior, and when those rules are breached, there'll be consequences.
Yep.
So how, in your experience, have you been able to achieve that in Toronto? I'm talking about the consequence end.
In several ways. One is not only the Downtown Young BIA, but other downtown stakeholders, including some of the major landlords, including Ryerson University, have had a lot of back and forth with City Hall and with the mayor's office about the need for policing resources downtown. And that they have stepped up on that. There are additional resources being put in place. My feeling, because as it happens, my office is right within a block of Yonge Dundas Square, which is frankly the focal point for a lot of our concerns. You haven't in recent years seen the number of police patrols that I've observed in traveling in other cities. If you go to New York, Chicago, London, all of which I've been in the last couple of years, you see a lot more boots on the sidewalk, which frankly you need. And then the other thing, just to circle back again, is that the police know what are the ground rules, what are they supposed to do and not do. With some of the SISs, the public health people say, we don't want you hassling our clients when they leave the premises. They're here to get well, leave them alone, so on and so forth. The police then sometimes see drug deals going down on the sidewalk, and they're not sure whether they're supposed to intervene or not. I don't think that's to anybody's benefit. I think the rules need to be clear for everybody.
Thank you, and we're out of time, unfortunately. We're over time, so thank you, Mr. Gillies. We're going to move on to the next.
Thank you, Councillor.
The next one is 4.4. We've got Kim Baker from St. Leonard's, Dr. James Popham from Wilfrid Laurier, and Peter Zoda from Grand River Community Health Center.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mayor Davis, members of the council. We're here to speak to you a little bit about the Brantford Downtown Outreach Team and the experiences, the very early experiences of the team so far. So I'll have James speak to some of the research foundation and evaluation aspects. I'll share a little bit about the operational aspects of the BDOT team, as we refer to it, and Peter is going to wrap us up with sort of some of the early impacts we're seeing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is James Popham. I'm with the Department of Criminology at Wilfrid Laurier University here in downtown Brantford. I'm going to speak briefly about the Brantford Downtown Outreach Team. As Mr. Gillies has mentioned previously, it's modeled on successful programs that have been operated throughout Canada and actually in a global context, particularly in urban and suburban centres. An important facet, however, to these programs is their ongoing success story is informed adaptability. In other words, the ability to pivot based on social, political, cultural, and other shifts that are occurring from the communities that they are present. The evaluation framework that we're working on sets out to cover a number of different issues related to this. So first, we're going to assess the BDOT's impact in the downtown core and its context. And second, then we're going to inform the mandate and the operational procedure that is shaping the way that BDOT operates. The goal really here being to take it from a replication of programs that are operating elsewhere and becoming a custom Brantford-specific concept. The evaluation inputs that we're going to use extend from several sources, including the program-related data. So that's going to be the information that's collected by the BDOT members in terms of their day-to-day activities. Second, the emergency service statistics that are going to be provided through cooperative agreements, pardon me, for instance, police emergency calls or calls for disorder. And three, key stakeholder informant perspectives. So this is going to be conversations with members of the Downtown Business Advisory Council, the members of the BDOT itself, as well as other important stakeholders downtown. And finally, we're going to consider operational perspectives, which are going to be presented from the organizing committee of the BDOT as well as BDOT members. The evaluation report will present findings through multiple lenses. They're going to include illustrating the scope of the activities undertaken by the BDOT. Second, it's going to be looking at year-over-year comparisons for changes or trajectories in emergency call data and other similar metrics. Third, it's going to be developing a holistic impact analysis. It's really going to be looking at the experiences of individuals who have worked with or experienced the BDOT. And finally, developing a social return on investment index using data provided through Social Value Canada. This is going to look at the relevant or relative cost savings that might be considered based on the number of calls and the nature of the calls that the BDOT has responded to.
So again, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm Kim Baker. I'm the Director of Clinical Services at St. Leonard's Community Services, and we're really grateful for your leadership and support on this project. The BDOT team has been operational since July 2nd. Just to remind you, it consists of a nurse practitioner, which is housed at the Grand River Community Health Center, a concurrent disorders clinician, a peer support worker, and a coordinator. And since they've hit the ground, they've been building bridges both with community partners looking for synergies in service provision and also with vulnerable and marginalized people within the downtown core. We began in our early days by hosting an outreach meeting, inviting outreach providing partners from other communities such as Guelph and downtown Toronto to share their experiences so that we might learn from them and also determine what we could adapt to fit the needs of our community. This is a pilot project. There's a lot of learning. We're testing different things, testing everything, essentially, the hours of work, the touchstone locations, and the mechanisms that we use to connect with our target population, trying to find the most effective way to link people with addiction, mental health, and homelessness issues to the services and supports that they need that will move them off of city streets into safe housing, supportive programs, and ultimately onto healthier lives. BDOT has connected with approximately 23 community agencies or partners since it began on July 2nd to learn about services, to discuss the resources that they have available to support individuals, and to look for opportunities to align our efforts with other community agencies. The response has been really positive from partners like the Canadian Mental Health Association, Sexual Assault Centre, Wesley, and Brant Community Healthcare System. We also internally at St. Leonard's have sort of realigned the leadership to BDOT to make sure that there's great connection to our crisis services like our COAST team, so the Community Outreach and Support Team, and MCRT, the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team. We've also been quite warmly welcomed by members, business owners in the downtown core. For example, PETA Plus has offered a place for a team to come in, refill their water bottles on hot days. Petro-Canada on Clarence has offered some in-kind donations of winter clothing for our clients. Dollarama has approached our coordinator and offered information about how to apply for grants for supplies for the benefit of individuals that we serve. And even though it's quite early in the work, having just started on July 2nd, the team has had some success already connecting with vulnerable people. So as of August 9th, they've had 132 interactions with an estimated 77 individuals. The top 3 most common presenting issues in order are substance use, housing, and mental health. They've made 65 referrals to community services, including 21 to shelter or housing supports, 12 to food bank programs, 11 to community mental health or addiction agencies, and 6 to the Rapid Access Addictions Medicine Clinic. There have been some early success stories, and I'm just going to share a couple. There was a woman that the nurse practitioner and peer support worker supported to find shelter and made a connection to RAM, where she was seen the next day. Or the young woman that the team encountered this past Friday. She had experienced a lot of trauma in her life, a lot of losses. She uses methamphetamine and is living on the streets. She had open infected wounds on various parts of her body and reported being afraid to seek medical attention for fear that she would be judged for her substance use. She also experiences mental health issues and recently attempted to take her own life. So the woman was taken to RAM by our outreach team, where she was treated for her medical issues, completed a full intake at RAM, slept there safely for a few hours, received medication for both her physical and mental health issues, and had a follow-up appointment scheduled for today. The BDOT staff also provided her with a meal, hygiene supplies so she could take a shower, and connected her with the Housing Resource Center to secure a shelter for the weekend, and had a plan to reconnect at the center yesterday for longer-term housing options. So these are just a couple of the examples of how the BDOT team is already having an impact on some of the most vulnerable citizens of our community.
I want to reiterate a theme that Kim touched on. I think it's important to know that BDOT is proving to itself to be a rallying point for so many partnering agencies. Kim mentioned CMHA, sexual assault, Wesley, BCHS. Indeed, I've never experienced an initiative where there's so many unanticipated benefits coming forward. And all those agencies, they're really flexing themselves to support BDOT, and I might even say getting excited, dare I say the word, getting excited about this initiative to really make a difference for these clients. And as much as those agencies are flexing themselves, I think BDOT is reciprocating. There's a great synergy that exists there. An example of that, like my agency provides primary health care, and the BDOT team is out on the street. They're practically doing half of an intake process for a client who probably hasn't had a connection to a family practitioner for so long. So we're exploring how do we expedite that. Kim touched on the RAM clinic. BDOT will make referrals to the addictions clinic. Well, not only is it that relationship, but sometimes clients at the addictions clinic drift away from service, and BDOT is proving itself to be, they help find clients on the street who've drifted away and have become disconnected. So it's really neat how the agencies are flexing and we're helping each other. You know what, there's been a pile of learnings in a short 6 weeks. There's going to be a pile of other learnings, and I'm just fascinated by the unanticipated benefits that are coming forward. I'd end with great appreciation to this council for making this happen. Clearly, this is a significant societal problem. It's going to take all of us to address it, and just great appreciation for your leadership. Thanks.
Thank you. We've got a little less than a minute. I've got 2 speakers, so if you can both be as succinct as possible with your questions, that would be great. Councillor Wall and then Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you. 6 weeks. Got a lot of work to do. You guys are doing great. Boundaries. What's downtown to you?
Well, I didn't bring my map. We have a geographic boundary that was defined at the outset of the project that we have stretched a little bit to include Alexandria Park, which has proven to be a bit of a hotspot for the vulnerable population that we're targeting. It is, I'd have to refer to the map, it's quite concentrated in the downtown core specifically, and that is intentional, so as not to dilute the impact of the team. We only have four folks on the team.
So, because limited time, when you're doing your outreach, if you could clarify just on behalf of the business owners and the residents of downtown East Ward and parts of Eagle Place, where can they call you and how far is your radius? That needs to be known, just to help us. And then time. In a 24-hour period, are you guys out in the morning, the afternoon, the evening, the night, or are you out on call all the time?
No, to the latter. Right now, it's Monday to Friday, but a variety of hours, so it's different every day. This is part of the learning process. So some days they're 10 to 7 to try to interface with evening programs or meal programs. Sometimes it's 8 to 4, depending if there's a RAM day where they start at 8 a.m. We're tried to be synergistic with other things that are happening in the community. But all of that is evolving. So we've started with those hours and are examining when we're having the most interactions with individuals. We've talked about extending to evenings and weekends. One of the challenges of that is that the most effective quality interactions that we've had with people are during the daytime when we can link them to other services and supports.
If I'm a business owner or a resident and I want to report something, is there always going to be someone who answers the phone, or am I going to be left having to send in an email or a voicemail?
There isn't always going to be someone who answers the phone.
Is that going to be possible? You guys are doing an incredible job, and I don't want to deflate that. But as the counselor, and I think Councillor Van Tilburg might be able to, speak to this too, as the one who's receiving the calls, it's important that I think that when someone sees something that someone answers when they call.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've tried to do early with our communications materials is to try to differentiate when it's appropriate to contact BDOT, when it's appropriate to use the 24/7 crisis line, when to use those other services, and certainly, as has been mentioned earlier, when police intervention is required. At this point, there isn't a 24/7 live answer, but it's certainly, as I said, everything's in evolution, and it's certainly something we can consider in terms of whether we can leverage some of our organizational crisis services that are 24/7.
I'm tremendously thankful for what you're doing.
Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you. I thought we were out of time. Thank you. Appreciate that. I did work downtown King Street in Hamilton as a frontline caseworker for a number of years. I'll give you a short question. In your professional opinions, this should not really be referred to as a pilot project. It should be referred to as an ongoing collaborative project, right?
That is certainly the desired trajectory of this, indeed. I think that this is a project that requires time to realize all of the outcomes that we hope for this project to result in.
That's a yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to items for consideration. Can I get a mover and a seconder for all items for consideration and consent? Councillor Weaver, Councillor Utley. We'll note first the items that have already been separated. We've got item 5.1.2, approval of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee due to an amendment. Item 5.1.3, feasibility study for the Oak Park Road extension, because there's an amendment. Item 5.1.13, Banbury Road parking control, as there's an amendment. Item 5.1.14, Brant Waterways Foundation Trail Improvement and River Access donation due to the delegation. Item 5.1.16, Environmental Policy Advisory Committee request for mandate change due to the delegation and a proposed amendment. Item 5.2.3, Brantford Downtown Outreach Team update due to the delegation. Do we have any other items for separation? Mayor Davis?
5.1.9, road painting, and 5.1.15, the Walden Hall of Fame.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderstel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 5.1.12.
Pardon me, tell me again the number.
5.1.12.
Thank you. Councillor Martin?
5.1.4.
Councillor McCreary? Okay, any others? We've got those, all right. So we'll vote on the items that have not been separated, which are 5.1.1, joint use agreement, 5.1.5, wastewater treatment plant digester gas line repair, 5.1.7, project update transportation master plan and master servicing plan, 5.1.8 King and Benton Redevelopment Corp. Parkside Drive Subdivision Agreement. 5.1.10 Universal Transit Pass Agreement with Wilfrid Laurier University and Wilfrid Laurier University Students Union. 5.1.11 Brantview Heights Subdivision Phase 2 Traffic and Parking Control. 5.2.1 Gift and Sponsor Agreement Neil and Jean Young and Family. 5.2.2 Bell Homestead National Historic Site 2018 Annual Report. 5.2.4 Temporary road closures July and August 2019. 5.2.5 Wastewater Operations 2018 Annual Summary Report. 5.2.6 Human Resources Master Plan 2019 Progress Report. And 5.2.7 the minutes. So, Councillor Sluss?
Sorry, I missed, I'd like to separate 5.1.8, please.
All right, so we'll call the vote on all of the other items that have not been separated. We're just waiting for it. Okay.
All items for consideration and consent not separated for discussion purposes are approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sluss, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, and Councillor Wall.
Thank you. We're going to start with the items that we had delegations for. So we're starting with 5.1.14 Brant Waterways Foundation Trail Improvement and River Access Donation. Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Chair Antosky. Just a question for staff. So when we get to the point where we're looking at estimates and we're looking at capital projects, could we somehow earmark the projects that Brant Waterways Foundation are interested in funding, just to make sure that we don't inadvertently decide to cut that program because of its importance? I think it's important that we all understand that there's funding opportunities for certain projects, and I just want to make sure they're highlighted during the budget process.
Take that through the chair. We will be setting up a new capital project for these items, and they will specifically have the TIRA funding as the funding source. So we'll make sure that those are not deleted.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Seeing no other speakers, we'll call the vote.
Item 5.1.14 Brant Waterways Foundation Trail Improvement and River Access Donation is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sluss, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, and Councillor Wall, noting that Councillor Vanderstelt is not in the room at the time of the vote.
Okay, the next item is 5.1.16, and I'd like to move an amendment on that, so I'd ask Mayor Davis if you could take the chair, please.
Yes, so we have 5.1.16 Environmental Policy Advisory Committee Resolution. We're moving this up because there was a delegation. Is there any discussion before we take Councillor Antosky's amendment? Seeing none. Councillor Antosky, if you please put your amendment on the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. That Clause B be amended to read as follows. That the necessary bylaw to repeal and replace Schedule 11, the Environmental Policy Advisory Committee of Chapter 26 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code as outlined in Appendix A, attached to the August 13th, 2019 memo from the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer, be presented to City Council for adoption. And this amendment is the result of some housekeeping items that we sat down with staff with just to work through to have some consistency in language, etc.
Right.
And
So-
my apologies, I need a seconder.
Second by Councillor Weaver. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the vote on the amendment.
Item 5.1.16, Environmental Policy Advisory Committee request for mandate change amendment is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilborg, noting Councillor Wall is out of the room.
All right, so just to conclude this matter, is there any discussion on the resolution as amended? Yes, Councillor Carpenter.
There was a memo from the clerk saying the clerk would like to research some of the changes in these recommendations that gives the committee the ability to accept fundraising dollars and do fundraising. So I wonder where we're dealing with what the clerk's concerns were about adjusting policy that allows a committee to do fundraising and do outreach and education, and where will that get picked up?
Yes, Julie, can you help us on that?
Sure. Through you, Chair. In regards to that, the request from the clerk's office was that staff would be looking into that, doing some research and reporting back to the committee of the whole in future. So these mandate changes actually don't include any changes associated with donation funds at all. That's been completely removed, and I believe that the idea is that it will be coming back towards the end of this year.
So does the outreach and promotion and education, is there an approval process for council to understand what the outreach and approval and education, because education and approval, education is, in the eyes of the beholder, and it's very much subjective.
Right. So through you, Chair, in regards to that, I believe that the purpose of the education and outreach, they still are an advisory committee to council, and any kinds of programs that they'd be seeking to run on behalf of the city as an advisory committee would still require approval through Committee of the Whole, Operations and Administration, and then City Council.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the resolution as amended? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Item 5.1.16, Environmental Policy Advisory Committee request for mandate change as amended is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilborg, and Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Julie. I'll now turn the chair back to Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. The next item on the agenda to be considered is 5.2.3, Brantford Downtown Outreach Team Update. Do we have any discussion on that? Councillor Wall?
Could I ask staff questions? So yeah, I'm just wondering about clarification regarding the two questions that I asked the delegation about the general geographic area that this covers, and one at a time.
So good evening, through you, Chair. I'm Aaron Wallace, Director of Strategic Planning and Community Partnerships. So the boundaries of the BDOT currently are what would be considered the city's academic district or city center. So boundaried by ICOM, Nelson, Alfred, and forgetting the fourth. But under the urban growth center, that academic and city district, we expanded it based on the feedback from our partners to include Alexandra Park and the property of Via Rail. And we know that the BDOT team, although the Brantford Commons sits slightly outside of that boundary, as does Brant's Crossing, they are all doing some work in there as well. The reason we're fairly specific about the boundary is it applies to our evaluation. So when we talk about potential reductions in police calls or ambulance calls or general disorder calls, we need to have a fairly contained boundary so we can have that evaluation.
So one of the things I remember the BIA asking, as well as I think it came up here on council, is who to call and when. And it's just a concern, like there's a handout going around right now, which I think is beautifully done. But I've been fielding calls from constituents and from business owners that they either A, still don't know who to call, or, and I don't mean to push the topic, but I mean the city has a 24-hour call center. How is it not feasible for us? Is it something that you're planning on implementing? Because the biggest thing for me, not just as counselor, is like if you call me, I answer. And I feel like sometimes we have residents of our community or businesses who are in a crisis situation who are calling because they don't know what to do. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's someone across the street who's just fallen over. They think they might have died, and they don't want to call the police because it's not. And I know you might not be able to answer that now, but I just want to make sure that I stress the importance for there to be someone to call.
Yeah, through the chair, that's critical to the conversations we're happening. So if it is somebody who appears to be in danger to themselves or others, the person killing over in the park, you call 911 immediately. So in any situation where the person feels like what they're observing is a danger to the person or to others, that still is an emergency call. If it's more of a nuisance call, so let's use the example of somebody, a group of individuals and there's some public urination or public drug use, that's a call to bylaw. So we do want to move those calls away from emergency response to bylaw, so bylaw can do the enforcement it needs to do. If what the person's observing is an ongoing situation, so a person coming into the business and every day at 2 o'clock, putting their head down on the table and appears to be in distress, not necessarily a call to bylaw or to police, but there should be some other service that can start to build a relationship with that person. That would be your outreach team. You're coming to work every morning and there's somebody who's waking up in the alley beside your business every day. You don't want to call the police because that might not be a good use of police resources, or from a humanitarian perspective, you want to see what else is out there. That's an ongoing situation where the BDOT might be able to establish a relationship. That's not to suggest that the outreach workers will go and tell the person, hey, you can't sleep here, hey, you can't put your head down. If it is the enforcement of use of public or private space, the police and bylaw provisions still apply. If what the person wants, like you mentioned, is a place to go with that information, it's a person who's coming in and talking to the clerk about their life, and I have this situation going on, I don't know where to turn, that business owner, that stakeholder, that downtown entity should be making connection to the BDOT, doing that warm handoff, or making them aware of that ongoing situation. So that's one of the reasons we did that handout, because it is complex. It is, and those categories aren't pure. It could be the same person in one moment is in crisis, and the next moment it's kind of an ongoing situation in your location. So that's why we're trying to host some of those trainings for the BIA members, for community partners, so they understand how to distinguish between those situations. Again, appreciating it's not pure and those situations are dynamic. If the behavior needs to stop because it is a harm to self or other, or it's a public nuisance, there's an enforcement mechanism to do that. If what you want to do is connect people to services because you have an ongoing relationship with that person, but not the skills or connections to help them, or you're observing the same person in the same situation and who should I call and help, that's an outreach situation.
One of the things the delegate spoke of when we had our original meeting was that in downtown Toronto, in that particular area, a lot of the members of that community are working together. So they're well aware of what the rules are, what they can do and what they cannot do, and they kind of police themselves, and they work together to share resources and to share help. Is that something that you guys are incorporating or you're seeing happen?
So to the chair, in the sense that individuals who may be living on the street.
So I mean, they know they're not allowed to hang out in front of the Tim Hortons. So some of what they had mentioned at the Downtown Young BIA is that members who have chosen to live, this kind of life are policing themselves, saying, hey, like, you're going to get us in trouble if you hang out here, so don't hang out there. Does that make sense?
Through chair, certainly does, yeah, and I remember that conversation exactly. So the outreach team is not, at this point, trying to identify members of that community to essentially kind of deputize or put them in a position where they have to do internal enforcement to that community. This is not one of the objectives of the program. Does it happen organically in certain communities? It may. It may be something we observe over time and be able to use to the mutual advantage over time, but it's not something we've set in terms of our operating manual that we're going to seek out folks that are living on the street to see how they can support the project in terms of within that community at this point.
I'm going to ask you one last question, and I apologize if it's uncomfortable. I've heard a lot about the wins of the outreach team, and I am happy to hear them. What are the roadblocks that you hit, and what can we do as a council to help? Because I want nothing more than this program to be unbelievably successful. And I can imagine, just with the concerns that I've heard as a councillor, what are the concerns that you're hearing from residents and business owners or the people that you're trying to help that we can help? How can we help?
No, through the chair, I think it is about taking this general conversation as broadly as possible. I mean, your comments around kind of the who to call, what's the difference between a crisis line and a coastline and outreach, those are all understandable. I work in social services, and sometimes I find myself thinking through what's the appropriate thing. For someone who's not entirely familiar with those programs, understanding and helping stakeholders and businesses understand who to call to get the most effective resources, I think is useful if council is looking to champion a particular aspect of this program. The information about what resources are out there and who to call. As you would know, Councillor, with the resources we created, we also created a map of downtown drop-in services. So whether that's food or clothing or showers or that kind of thing, that might be useful to champion as well, because we know that often stakeholders like businesses are, maybe use the word frustrated, or like, what do I do in this situation? I don't know what resources are out there or who to call, when maybe next door right then is a food program, or maybe down the street is a shower the person could use. So any championing of those resources and getting the information out is useful. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring to light the sustainability conversation. We know that programs like this need to be operational for several years to establish those relationships and really start to bite into the impact. So the group's working very hard on writing grants and talking to stakeholders. I think there will be a moment for this council when we come forward and say we've got a couple of grants in the hopper to other levels of government. Does council want to champion this, write a letter of support or be vocal in its support of, or where that money could come from? So I think that moment is coming. We're at the early stages of that now.
Councillor Wall, you're out of time. Do you want back on the list?
Thank you so much.
Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank you, Aaron, and also Ms. Baker, for the work that you've done to date in putting this together. I know you've reached beyond the usual envelope of your responsibilities, and you've done an excellent job. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of this council and the city for the fine work you're doing. So the question I have, kind of in that line, Dr. Popham, I don't think is here now, but did speak earlier. So what is the arrangement with Laurier in that respect? Are we paying for that service? Are they volunteering? Like, what's that arrangement?
So through the chair, the contribution we're going to make to the evaluation is to pay for one of Dr. Popham's research assistants. And in doing so, we've been able to put a grant forward to the Social Services Humanity Research Council. So that's the federal council that funds academic and community research. We don't have an outcome on that yet. So if we get that grant as a collective, we'll just get more research assistants and more data analyst support and whatnot. If not, that's okay, because Dr. Popham and this research assistant will support the evaluation as he laid out. I can say that it's almost entirely in kind. An evaluation that is as complex and involved as what Dr. Popham laid out, including that social return on investment analysis, which are incredibly expensive to get. So we're getting pennies on the dollar when we commit to our funding of the research assistant. We're going to get a very robust evaluation back from that, and in a timely manner. We're looking for early return on investment and outcome data by March. We understand that is the time we would need to have conversations with the LIN and other health service providers in terms of funders. So in that short timeline, the complexity of that evaluation, and most of that's being done by Dr. Popham in kind in support of the program.
Right. So to me, it's an example of what Peter Zota was talking about, that it's interesting, this program, the enthusiasm it's engendering through the community, particularly the downtown community, where organizations are offering to help and doing it on a very sort of enthusiastic basis. How we're lucky that we have Laurier with us downtown, that the availability of this sort of resource that we would have had to pay for at a very steep charge, this kind of data collection analysis, which is going to be critical to be able to attract funding from other levels of government. So that leads me to my last question. The program's been up and running since early July. Dr. Popham's had some involvement now. Any idea when we might have some data that we could actually use in approaching other levels of government?
So through your chair, now we are looking at that March 1st as a deadline to be able to track back not just the aggregate program numbers of contacts and referrals, but also we're hoping to be able to track the number of individuals connected to what's called coordinated care plans, which is the language of the Ministry of Health and of the LIN specifically. Our understanding and conversations with them is if we could show that this program, as Mr. Zota said, is reconnecting people to their coordinated care plan or connecting people to a plan, particularly through the RAM, there's a huge return on investment on that for the Ministry of Health. So by March 1st, we're hoping to have some aggregate output and outcome data. We're hoping to have that. hoping to have some qualitative information from the partners and from the BIA members so we can roll that together into a package. That won't be the final evaluation. That won't come in probably until next fall as we've done our full year, then have some runway for that. But by March, I anticipate we have some data we can bring forward to other funders.
Yes, I can't leave that as my final question. So many people, I think of this as just a summer program. What's going to happen through the fall and into the winter? And what can we expect at estimates?
At estimates?
Yes, I guess I really shouldn't have stuck that into that question.
So through the chair, I think that the transition you'll see as the seasons change is right now it is very much on the street. It is in the parks, on the trails that are in the catchment, on the sidewalks. As the season progresses and weather becomes wetter or colder, what we'll probably do, and we'll learn as we go here, we'll transition some of that work to maybe within the library, within some of the shelters that are in the catchment. So still try to make those connections. But we do know that there might be less folks on the street we're trying to connect with, but those folks are still in the community somewhere. So we'll work with our food providers and our shelter system to make sure that we're still connecting with folks that need that help. And hopefully following through on some of the early connections that we've had to continue to build those relationships and get them into services. I can say, of course, as always, I'll take direction from this council and my executive team on what comes forward through estimates. I can say at this point, I'm not planning to bring an unmet need through estimates. I remain confident that the early outcomes are indicative of what this program can and will become, and that we will position this council to advocate for external funders to come forward. But if we reach a point where the program will end due to lack of funding, I'll certainly advise council of that immediately and look for your direction on that. But I'm not preparing an unmet need through estimates at this point. I want to see what's out there in terms of sustainable funding and what we can do.
Very last question. So I assume then we're looking at using casino funds and making plans. We should appropriately consider that there may be another request next year, depending on what the outcome is with the negotiations with other funding levels and agencies.
That's your chair. I think that's a fair statement. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Aaron. Thank you, and thank you the outreach team, for the good work that's being done. It sounds like we've got off to a good start. I heard earlier from the presenters that there were some early successes, and I think it's important to understand these are early successes. There's a long way to go at this. So I think, alluding to what Mayor Davis said, we need some data to go out to the community and answer questions that come to us. So if we could get reports every, maybe once a month, maybe asking too much, but every quarter, if we get a report indicating the short-term successes, the medium-term, the long-term. I think we want to get to where people are leading safe, productive lives. I think that's the ultimate goal. But if we could get some of that information, that would help us. I've had one or two people say to me, "What a waste of money," and I think I need I combat that with either you do something about it or it gets worse. So I need, and I think other councils will like that information, that would say, well, we spent this much money, but here's what we're getting back as a return on that investment. So keep up the good work, and look forward to some more successes. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Tilburg.
You just perked my ears up with that comment about a waste of money, and I'm going to say that if anything, we're timely, and I'm good. I'm happy to see that you've got feet on the ground, and teams out there. Councillor Wall and myself I think we've had a storm of calls, quite significant. And one of the things that has caught my attention when I check my emails throughout my shifts and stuff is I'll hear the outreach team is here, we're on the ground. So without those monies being spent, we wouldn't have had these contacts being made. That said, I'm already astounded in the short period of time, the data that you've tossed at me. I thought this is a pretty good start. It's raw data though. This is not analytical. This is more anecdotal and engagement and a couple outcomes. So what, my question to you comes along the lines of, people have a tendency to see something and they instantly go to social media or the media. And we need them actually to contact those that can address the issue. Sometimes they call us, or it's through the media that we're contacted. So is there a couple things? One, what is the best way to contact the outreach? Two, I know your outreach is really to be on the ground and meeting the people that need to be and have their lives improved. But for the other parts of the community watching, I guess, what's the best way to contact? And do you have in other words, people want to contact through emails, phones, social media, and that. What's the best way, whether it's a business, a residence? Because what we get is like what I call a raw noise. And I might get it third and fourth hand, right? And so what we want to say is, this is what you should do. That's what I want, is a straightforward, this is what you should do. You're in this area, here's what you should do. This is who you contact. And then we know, like with other things, we know a work order has started or something like that. So that people know that we're working on that issue, right? That's kind of what I'd like, give me kind of an answer to that.
Yeah, through the chair, the best way to contact the outreach team is through email. And I'm just going to, if the chair will allow me, I'll just look back and confirm the email addresses. So through the chair, it's b dot at.
We're all going to get a copy of it.
Yeah, we'll circulate that for sure, so you have it. So that would be the best way to get hold of the outreach team. In terms of that triaging of what to do, I think what we're going to try to do is maybe set up a city website with that who to contact list. We're certainly circulating that and trying to have those trainings wherever we can. The ideal scenario would be if somebody identifies a situation in the downtown and they know that it is either an emergency enforcement situation or it's a bylaw infraction or it is an outreach, a chronic thing that needs outreach attention, that they would call the particular service. If it is a chronic thing, they should email the outreach team. That goes to all members of the outreach team. So regardless of shift or day, that's going to be something that's circulated among the team. But they are not going to be in a position to immediately respond and resolve that situation. If it needs an immediate response, then the constituents need to know that there is mechanisms of enforcement, whether police or bylaw, who can handle that. In terms of starting of the work order, I think through police and bylaw, they would have a mechanism to kind of follow that through and potentially could report back to council. Outreach team's a little bit of a different creature in the sense that they're probably reaching out the first few times just to make a relationship. They're just trying to kind of figure out, could we get a first name? Could we talk about what's going on? Are you here again tomorrow, kind of thing. And so they probably won't be in a position to log a work order and follow that through and make that public information. But certainly constituents can be assured that if they are reaching out with a situation in the downtown that fits the mandate of the outreach team will respond. There is no question. We want to meet and reach as many of those folks as we can for the human element, of course, but also we need that data. We need those outcomes. So constituents can rest assured if they are reaching out to the outreach team, it's within the catchment. It's a chronic ongoing situation. We're going to go try to find that person.
So in a nutshell, if they see something that is dangerous or what have you, then to contact the proper authorities.
Yes.
They see a chronic recurring situation, which is what they're seeing.
Yeah.
Then that is to first make the contact with your group, and then those connections can be made. In other words, that they can then give the information. This is where this person is located. This is what they're doing. This, and find out what they need.
And through the chair, just being open and honest about kind of the expectations we set for the community. I mean, we heard from other outreach teams that sometimes they didn't have success with people that were sleeping on a park bench for months or years until they finally established enough of a relationship to have that, get into that gritty conversation.
Then, like, some will move very slow and others may move fast, though. Is that not correct?
That's correct, yeah. And that's been our experience in the anecdotes that Kim shared, is that even within a couple of weeks, we saw some kind of great referrals into addictions medicine or to the shelters. So some of those might move very fast. They might have connected with somebody on day one, that it might be day 300 before that person's in addictions medicine. But these things, depending on the person and their willingness and their readiness.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Aaron, and thank you for the work that you're doing I have had the opposite response from my constituents who've asked me questions about what are we doing, and I explained to them what we're doing. They're happy we're doing it. They know it's expensive, but they know not doing it is more expensive. So I wanted to really speak to not all the things that have been talked about, but the enthusiasm of the business community and the community in the downtown core where you're doing this. And there will be a need to expand that beyond the downtown core, for example, in the Coburn Street East corridor where most of them are living. How does the rest of the community get involved? If they want, enthusiastically want to be involved, is there a way for them to be involved, whether it be financial donation or physical donation or something that they can do? Because I'm hearing from lots of people in the community, what can I do to help? And I don't have an answer for them.
Yeah, through the chair, donations in terms of outreach supplies, always welcome. Obviously referrals, if they know somebody who's in the downtown, they can do a warm handoff to the team. That's great as well. If it's a service providing agency and they feel like they can work with us to develop pathways, so kind of whatever their perspective and kind of the character of where they're coming from is, there's a way we can work with them. We do have an outreach coordinator who part of her role is to connect with those community partners, talk about what that is. I think that the most tactical and most immediate would be around outreach supplies. That's a great way to build relationships if you can go out and give a boost or give a pair of socks and start that conversation. The BIA has been very generous in terms of making a $10,000 contribution, and we budgeted that to last the year, but the more the better. So if you're if constituents who want to provide financially or through donations, we can have that conversation certainly.
Could we get something like that so that, I could keep that, and when someone asks me, I could say, here's a list of things you can do, and here's how you do it?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Thank you, because I know the enthusiasm. The community wants to help solve this problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Sless?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Aaron, I'd just like to know the logistics of all this. Like, how the outreach team, who do they approach? Like, they're not approached, they approach other people, right? Like, how do you determine who you're going to approach and who you don't approach? I don't understand how that works. Can you please educate me?
Through the chair, it's both. So I think they would approach anyone. I think what they've been doing, especially over the first couple of weeks, is regardless of what the presenting situation might be, I think they're going out there and saying, this is who we are, this is what we're doing. I think what they're finding is that people are approaching them. So as word is getting out that there's an outreach team and they might have some connections into help, they are getting people approaching them. They do have their bright yellow shirts and hats, so they are noticeable out there. So it is not a matter of, profiling by appearance or guessing. I think they're out there talking to everyone on the street, trying to make connections. I think this council knows a person might appear to not be in distress, but have some significant behind-the-scenes mental health or addictions concerns, or it could be just the opposite, where maybe those things are presenting on the surface. So to answer your question directly, I think they're introducing themselves to every single person they can, both on the street and business stakeholders, and they are starting to see a flow of people approaching them because they're noticeable and people kind of know what the theory of the case is with them and coming up to them.
Okay, and just secondly, if I could, Madam Chair, one of the services we provide, I would presume, would be to direct them to shelter, those that don't have a place to call home at night. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Do we have the capacity to handle what we're directing?
Through the chair, at the moment we do, yes. There are shelter beds available for those who would want to stay in a shelter.
Okay, so capacity is not an issue?
Through the chair, not at this moment, it is not.
Both male and female?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCreary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome. Have you revised your estimate of folks in the city that need a little help to get their lives in order?
Through the chair, I'm still comfortable with that 200 to 300 in the core. I think we've met with 77 individual persons already.
Sorry, say that more slowly, Aaron.
Yeah, certainly. I think when we first spoke, it's difficult to estimate, but I thought between 200 and 300 based on our point-in-time homeless count and who's in the shelters and observational things. And I think to date, we know that over time, the unique individuals, the new individuals that they meet with will start to peter out because they'll have met a number of them already. So we approximate to be 77 already. Mm-hmm. I think that 200 to 300 is we'll know more as we go, but I'm still comfortable with that being a starting point as an estimate.
So of the people that we've interacted with on the street, are there any folks that we now have sheltered and off the street?
Through the chair, yes. I believe it's 6.
6, okay. So we're averaging 1 a week?
Through the chair so far, yes.
Okay. So if I'm doing the math, that's 250 weeks or 5 years at this rate. Is there a goal or a plan or a methodology to make sure that we get as many people helped as quickly as we can?
Yeah, through the chair, we did a couple of things up front. One is that we went and we had a conversation with people that had some lived experience. So we talked to people who were in the RAM, who were in the shelters, who were at some of those service locations, and said, like, where's the best time and place to connect with you for that exact reason? What's the critical mass up front? As Kim mentioned, we're trying to adjust routes and schedules and touchdown points. So do some work in the shelters, in the library, in the Salvation Army to meet as many people as possible.
So we currently have 4 folks that are on the street in yellow shirts. Is that correct?
Through chair, that's correct.
And are they on the streets 8 hours a day?
Through chair,
from
7.
From the presentation, I heard that there's been a lot of interaction with other agencies. And I hope we're not diluting the time that we should be devoting to individuals on the street by having meetings.
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. As much as possible, they're on the street. We did commit a lot of their time in the first couple of weeks to having those meetings and kind of being behind closed doors and figure it out. Beyond that, yeah, as much as possible, we want a presence in the downtown, on the street, in the shelters, in the library, yes.
And so we've heard that there is a geographical limit to the patrol area. Are we patrolling folks who might be spending the night alongside the Grand River, say between the Armories and Earl Haig Park?
Lucha, let me get an answer for that.
Yeah. Councillor Martin and I sometimes are seeing folks that are there early in the morning, which leads us to believe that they're spending the night in that vicinity. And I hope we're not going to evolve into a 9 to 5 organization. I heard some discussion tonight that we're on the street at different days and different times. But I think that's important to recognize that it's got to serve the people that we're trying to help and not serve the staff and the partner organizations. So the times on the street they've got to adjust to suit what we're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Councillor Toski. I know when we were talking about this and talking about the funding for this during the estimates process, we also talked about the library, who has some security concerns. And my thought, anyway, was having the outreach program in the area would hopefully assist with some of those concerns. Do you know if there's been any connection with the library, with the BDOT crew, to actually see if we're mitigating some of those concerns from the library folks?
Yeah, through the chair, it might be too early to see if we're helping to address what they had come forward to discuss in terms of their additional security needs. Absolutely, the connection with the library is there. That's one of the first discussions the coordinator had. The library's offered touchdown spaces. The library is a part of the ongoing route. As the weather gets wetter and colder, it'll be more of a focal point. So that intersection between the BDOT and library is very strong. Whether it results in a reduction in their need for security, it's probably too early to tell, but no question it will be a benefit to the folks that go to the library and might need some additional support.
Okay, and so when we're going and we're talking to folks on the street and we're trying to assist them in the manner that they need assistance in, so whether it be going to the RAM clinic or housing, when we get to the point where someone is housable, because some of those folks just simply aren't at this point because they just need some help, where is the city's bottlenecks going to be? Because that's my next concern. We're going to be spending, we're spending some time and we're spending taxpayer money. And I think it's the proper use of taxpayer money to do this outreach. But my concern is we're going to be moving them hopefully into a position where they can be housed. And I think that's going to be a concern, and that's where our bottleneck's going to be. So I'm just curious if there's been thought from the group about what that is, and if there's any strategies that we should try to start implementing now to try to make sure that those bottlenecks are taken away so we can really be a full service and get the people right through to recovery to housing.
Through the chair, I'll be cautious not to overstep my colleague, the Director of Housing, but there's no question that the bottleneck would be between individuals who are living in a shelter and transitioning them to affordable housing, safe affordable housing. So I think you're right. The goal of the BDOT is get off the street if you're ready for that. Get into a shelter, get yourself into whatever treatment you need, whatever recovery you need. But the next moment is for them to get a place of their own and to be able to transition further down that pathway, and we are going to see a bottleneck. We're already seeing a bottleneck. Council's well aware of the wait list for affordable housing. That will be something that Council could potentially give additional thought to.
So when you do come back with a report of some of the data that you're collecting now, can you make sure that you include that just so it's not something that's forgotten? It's something that I think needs to stay in our face. We need to make sure that we're cognizant of that issue, and we need to really start hardcore planning on what we're going to do about that.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you, Aaron.
Councillor Wall, second.
Is there any other neighboring communities who have outreach teams like this?
Through the chair, we're aware of Guelph, Windsor, Hamilton, and the Yonge Street BIA. I'm sure there are others, but those are the ones we've had contact and discussions with.
And is there any kind of coordination or information sharing between those groups?
Yeah, through the chair, one of the first things we did, as Kim mentioned, was how do we call it an outreach networking day. And so we invited those communities to come, share their best practices, share their learnings, and we continue to liaise with the Guelph group, and I know that Laura's been in contact with the Windsor group. Obviously, Phil coming tonight, we're still in contact with the Toronto group. So there's not a formal network or email list or ongoing scheduled events, but we certainly want to be mindful that those groups have a lot of information that would be helpful, and we liaise with them.
Is there any way that Brantford could maybe set the pace for something like that and move forward with trying to put together a network like that?
Yeah, through the chair, certainly. Yeah, if that's the direction of council, we can certainly take that on, and it would depend on the willingness and time of the other outreach teams. They're like us. Their group is on the street all the time. So when we've asked them to come for a half day and share their learnings, that's 4 people off their street for half a day. But even electronically or otherwise, we could certainly look at that.
I guess, if I could request to have you guys reach out to them to maybe send you guys some of their tips and tricks and success stories, especially if those groups have been, because you've mentioned that right now you guys are still in your infancy and you're, going through all the learning. If those organizations have been in place for years, maybe there are some things that they could share. And I mean, we have a very unique community. Maybe there are some things here that could be very helpful to them.
Sure.
And then if you could just, bring it back to us when you come back.
Sure.
Thanks. And thank you again.
Okay, thank you. We've reached the end of our speakers list here, so with no further discussion, we'll call the vote.
Item 5.2.3, Brantford Downtown Outreach Team Update is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Audley, Councillor Sless, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, and Councillor Wall.
Okay, thank you. We're going to continue on in the order of the items that were previously separated before committee separated some others. So the next item that we're looking at is 5.1.2, which is the approval of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee. And I believe that Mayor Davis has an amendment for that one, so that's why that one is separated.
So it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Martin that the approval of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee be amended such that Clause B of item 5.12 be amended as follows. 1, add the words designate after the words comprised of the following members, and secondly, remove the word president before the words Conestoga College Institute of Advanced Learning, and replaced with the words campus manager Brantford. So this is like your motion earlier this evening, Councillor Antosky. It's meant to kind of clean up some of the wording so that it's in line with what we currently understand the membership will be to this committee.
Okay, discussion on the amendment. I've got Councillor Weaver.
Thank you. I'm hoping we can consider this friendly. I'd just like to add that another group, a member of the Elder Abuse Awareness Committee, to this group. I'm hoping that would be considered friendly from the mover and seconder of the amendment.
I'm willing to adopt that.
Thank you.
Councillor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you. Since there was no discussion on the original amendment, I'll speak to the original resolution. We're on to the amendment. Could staff indicate how the participants in this committee were chosen, if that was mandated by Government of Ontario, or if that was something that we've done?
So through the chair, it's a little bit of both. So the Government of Ontario mandates you must have individual representation from certain sectors, so health sector, policing, youth services, etc. And so what we looked at is who might be the most appropriate representative from those sectors that were kind of the large agencies that had ability to move resources around and dedicate staff to it and could advocate. So, so it's a little bit of both.
We don't see many representatives from the community at large, though, on this. It's all representatives of groups.
Through chair, at this point, yes, that's correct.
Okay. We're not prohibited from enlarging our membership, though.
Through chair, no. Council has absolute discretion
Thank you very much.
The committee.
So, Madam Chair, having heard that, I think I'll attempt what Councilor Weaver just did to solicit from the mover and seconder an opportunity to friendly up some amendments here to include, first of all, a representative from the Chamber of Commerce, Brantford Brant. Would the mover and seconder consider that friendly? And secondly, the downtown business improvement area, a representative from them. Would the mover and seconder consider that to be friendly as well? Okay. And you realize you're just emboldening me. But I find, Madam Chair, that the thing that's most noticeable by its absence is representation from rank and file folks who live in the city. And what I'd like to propose is that we also add 3 citizen representatives to this committee. I wonder if the mover and seconder would consider that to be friendly. Three folks that pay the way, who are taxpayers, who have a vested interest in the municipality, who probably lived here all their lives. You know, the kind of people that vote for us.
Does the mover and seconder consider that friendly?
Madam Chair, I see that it's not going to be friendly, so I will ask you come back to me for a second opportunity, and I'll move it as an amendment.
Okay, do we?
Answered your question. You require me to think immediately. My age, I need time to think about these things, Councilor McCreary. And what I was balancing it off against is that the intent of this committee is that the plan to a large degree will be drawn from previous plans that will be updated. It will be much of what we'll be looking at will be staff presenting to us this compilation of plans and this committee meeting quarterly to review that. So it's not as if this committee is going to be doing the groundwork to actually produce like first drafts, but it will provide important input into the plan. And so when I consider that, and considering your suggestion, I'm prepared to accept that as a friendly amendment, given that we don't want the committee to be too large, it just becomes very unwieldy. Right. And I think probably that'll push it out to about the maximum number of members we want to make sure that it's a group that works. And once you get it too large, it doesn't work. So I think we probably hit the maximum number with that friendly amendment.
And further to that, Madam Chair, I would also be looking to the mover and seconder to consider it friendly if one of those 3 appointees were to be a senior citizen.
How do you define senior citizen?
Anyone older than you and me, Mayor.
That'd be somebody months older than me, I guess. Okay, all right, that's fine.
That's also friendly? Okay. So I don't see any other speakers. So on the amendment, we will call the vote.
The amendment to item 5.1.2, approval of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee with the friendly amendment to include a member of the Elder Abuse Committee, the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Brantford, Downtown Business, DBIA, and 3 citizen reps, including one specifically a senior citizen, is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Celeste, Councillor McCurry, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilbork, and Councillor Wall is out of the room.
Okay, any discussion on the item as amended? Seeing none, we'll call the vote.
Item 5.1.2, approval of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee as amended is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Celeste, Councillor McCurry, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilbork, and Councillor Wall is out of the room.
Thank you. Okay, the next item we're on is 5.1.3, which is the feasibility study for the Oak Park Road extension. And that is separated because I believe Councillor Vanderstelt has an amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you like me to read said amendment at this time? Okay. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Weaver. 5.1.3 amendment feasibility study for the Oak Park Road extension. That item 5.1.3 feasibility study for the Oak Park Road extension be amended to include the following points. First of all, E, that staff be directed to include in the Oak Park Road extension environmental assessment the identification of mitigation measures for residents affected by the new roadway, including but not limited to noise mitigation measures in consultation with the ward councillors and the residents. And F, that the following capital projects be deferred outside the 10-year capital forecast pending the completion of the Transportation Master Plan update currently underway, to allow funds to be prioritized for the Oak Park Road extension. 1, the Veterans Memorial Parkway extension from Market Street to Colburn Street, Wayne Gretzky Parkway in the amount of $19,850,000. And number 2, the Veterans Memorial Parkway, Mount Pleasant Street to Erie Ave with bridges in the amount of $23,014,000. And G, that unspent funds allocated in previous years to the RD 1502 Veterans Memorial Parkway Extension and RD 1501 Veterans Memorial Parkway, Mount Pleasant Street to Erie Ave with bridges be returned to their original funding sources and that these projects be closed. And H, let staff be directed to exclude the use of the glebe lands and transportation alternatives being developed for the city as part of the Transportation Master Plan update that is currently underway, unless otherwise requested by Six Nations of the Grand River. And that I, staff be directed to develop a disposition strategy for the properties acquired for the Veterans Memorial Parkway that are no longer required for that project, following the completion of the Transportation Master Plan, and report back to Council following the completion of the Transportation Master Plan update with a recommended disposition strategy and options on how to direct funds from the sale of any properties. And speaking to it further, Madam Chair, I don't think it's any secret anymore what we have experienced within the core, in the bottleneck areas in the core of the city, the increased traffic load, the increased wear on those high traffic routes in the intensification corridors or elsewhere. I think I can't recall a meeting that I've been to where, safe access from the 403 did not come up. It comes with development meetings. It comes with meetings about safety, about road safety. It comes with, it came every step of the way on the campaign. We understand, and we have understood for quite a long period of time now, that there has been a need for an alternative route to the 403. If more importantly, and I guess more specifically, to put a finer point on it, You may recall from 10 years ago, I think, we were looking at extending a trail on Power Line Road, and we had options about where we were going to put that trail, and we weren't too sure how we could do it. And we found out we couldn't do it on city property. But if you notice, even though it took 17 years for us to negotiate the lands north of Power Line with the County of Brant, we did not put the trail on the County of Brant's land. We stopped with the trail. I think there was a member or two of council here tonight that worked on that. But we simply didn't go ahead and place a trail or a roadway or anything that on property managed by the County of Brant. And in the same vein, if you move into a new property, you'd be strangely remiss if not considered a bit nuts if you start paving someone else's property so that you can drive on a driveway that is on somebody else's property. You just don't do that. We have a situation in front of us today, which we've always had since we purchased the lands heading up to Wayne Gretzky Parkway, where we had the option at some points in the past, in the history of being able to pave over somebody else's land. We no longer have that option, and we would be asking for trouble if we went ahead and did that. In the same vein that we would be asking for trouble in doing it to anybody else. So moving forward, the clearest example of city departments and staff and council and the mayor, I might add, in working together is this amendment would make it much easier for us to find the funding to provide safe access to Highway 403 and not cut off by Ward 5 from the rest of the downtown core and the rest of the city. There's so many advantages to having approached it this way. So there you go.
Mayor Davis on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd like to speak to the entire resolution later once it's amended, but I want to talk about this amendment, which I was involved in preparing. And, what this amendment does is it puts to rest the BSAR option. That's what this does. And I got to tell you, for me, that was hard because I have a history here that the rest of you don't have. You've heard the history before, but I'll just recap it for those that don't know. When I was on council before, we recognized, and I still recognize, like in terms of geography and connecting one part of the city to the other, the BSAR route is probably, from a transportation viewpoint only, the most logical. We had the agreement in place with Six Nations. The last thing I did when I was in council in 1991 was approve the environmental assessment for that roadway. So, it's with heavy heart that I see it finally put to rest, but it needs to be put to rest. The reality is that that is no longer a feasible route. We need to accept it. We need to accept that our master transportation plan should accept that. And I'll tell you, it's been hard for staff because all of the planning they've done for the last 2-3 decades in some ways revolves around using the glebe lands. And it's been hard for them to let it go. From a transportation engineering perspective, it made a lot of sense. And so how did I come around to this viewpoint where I'm prepared to put the BSAR to rest? It's because I said during my campaign, leadership begins with listening. I've spent time on Six Nations. I've listened to the many voices on Six Nations. I've had a respectful dialogue with some of them, wondering if there were toll roads here or 99-year leases, would it make a difference? My sense of it, my reading of that community is that no, it will not. That community, and I think I understand from their history that they resent a neighboring community saying we need your land, and it's clearly their land, to be used for our purposes. And so to my mind, the only way that this will ever be feasible for us to incorporate the glebe lands and integrate it into our infrastructure and road system will be when Six Nations has decided what they want to do with that property, and that whatever they want to do with it is going to require that integration. They're not yet at that stage, and we can no longer wait for them to come to that stage. We need to move forward, put in place a route to deal with the traffic needs of West Branch and the rest of the community. And so I think it's time we just accepted the reality of the situation and then planned accordingly. And doing so out of respect to Six Nations, that it is incumbent upon us that to work cooperatively together, and that's what I pledge as part of my campaign. If the Six Nations Committee wants to do something with Glebe-lands, I'll be the first one to talk to them about how we can help make that possible. But in the meantime, we should not unilaterally include the Glebe-lands in our transportation planning and move forward with what we can do without the Glebe-lands being part of our transportation planning. So that's what this is all about. It's taking the money that's been allocated for that part of the entire ring road around the city, allocating it towards Oak Park Road. It's looking at the properties that have been purchased over the last 25 to 30 years and looking at what we can do to dispose of them and use those funds accordingly. And then the other part about this resolution I like is that, no matter what the route is, where it is, there's going to be impacts upon residents. Of all the 5 or 6 options that have been on the table, every single one of them has implications for adjoining landowners' residents. And so I like the fact that the first paragraph of this amendment is, for those that will be affected by the Oak Road extension, Oak Park Road extension, and there will be properties and residents that will be affected, that will do whatever we can in the design of the roadway to mitigate and lessen the impact on those residents. We owe it to them to do that. We will do that. So I'm very pleased to have been involved in the preparation of this amendment. There are a lot of hands in this from various members of staff, Councillor Vanderstel, the ward councillors, Councillor Weaver. I'm very pleased to support it and move forward.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Councillor Weaver.
Thank you. So thank you to Councillor Vanderstel for drafting this, working on it, probably even before he was elected, I think. He had a vision, and I'm happy to support this vision. It really aligns with what even past term Larry and I were working towards, with getting a staff member hired to do the Transportation Master Plan, starting the feasibility study, which is what's here before us tonight, and now puts us in a position to finally make a good decision that ought to have been made 20 years ago. But however, we are a strong council that's going to make a good decision that's going to really have a positive impact on our city. It's going to lessen the wear and tear on some of our other roads. And despite the fact it is unfortunately going to have an impact, no matter where we put this road, it was going to be an impact. And I also want to thank the mayor for first his leadership on this. I know this is something he campaigned on hard, and also his commitment to making sure that the residents in that area are going to be listened to. It's going to be a tough road to try to resolve all the concerns they're going to have, but I'm very happy that we have a council that's committed to doing that and moving this forward as quickly as possible, so people can be home by now, because we have a mayor that wants that. So thank you.
Councillor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you. I'm really very pleased to see the work that Councillor Vanderstel has put before us tonight. It injects some much-needed clarity into Brantford's transportation plan, and it serves to bury the long-held belief that many of us had, that somehow we'd find a way to build our road on the lands of people who didn't want it there. It is certainly a turning point for us. In the prior term of council, there was much work done to move that road system through the glebe lands, much discussion with respect to transportation planning. And as Councillor Sless would say, we were, I think, planning to put 20 pounds of sugar in a 10-pound bag. So here we are tonight, turning the corner on something that was never going to work for us. Clarity, as I said, and now we can move forward and concentrate on doing the right things for the residents of the city of Brantford, and perhaps eventually folks in West Brant will be home by now.
Councillor Carpenter.
The mayor spoke very eloquently on this and really expressed how most of us are feeling or ought to be thinking. And this resolution clearly directs that. It's the cost that's going to impact the community, but it costs not to do anything. I don't want anybody to think this is a Ward 1 resolution, because it's not. I mean, the impact of not having an access point to the 403 from West Brant is impacting all the wards of the city. It impacts the 4th ward dramatically. I just go down Clarence Street and just count the number of accidents at Clarence. We're going to be count the number of accidents at West and Clarence Street, or the traffic flow that flows through the community where it shouldn't be, and those kinds of problems that we're having, which will mitigate some of the traffic going out Comer Street. County Road 18 itself is jammed in the morning and the evening. And we can look at an alternate route by having that expanded to 4 lanes with the county and maybe with the provincial funding to alleviate another access point, which is very, it's sitting right there. This gives the access to the 403, which is necessary. The funding, had we kept the funding agreement we have with the province would be paying a lion's share of this. But years ago, council decided to support a small group of raging grannies that didn't want it in their area, and so it was canceled. It was canceled. The funding from the province was canceled for a short-term paycheck, which Ward 4 benefited by because we built that piece of the Wayne Gretzky Parkway to Power Line Road with that funding. But the community in the long term is going to pay to their taxes a large amount of money to complete this very expensive road, which is very much needed because the province is off the hook for funding it. That was not very well thought out at the time. So I was here for that, so I remember those debates. It wasn't very well thought out, and as the mayor had said, this is the choice that's left for us. It's the best solution of what we have left, and if we don't do something now, we'll never get it done. We have to move on and get this road built, and it's this council that's going to do it. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a decision that everybody's been waiting for somebody to move. We all kind of look at one another, and we're looking at about a 50-year plan that was done about 50 years ago, and thinking, well, gee, I don't know whether it became a sentimental favorite or what happened, but it was like a bad smell. It just wouldn't go away, and it stayed. And I think it certainly assists my ward because Brant Ave just gets plugged. People don't want to drive on it because it's so backed up between the casino and people trying to access West Brant. It's a nightmare. I think I did some quick math when we were doing this. I think we've got about 25 houses that we own that were purchased to finish the BSAR at the other end. I think that at a minimum amount of money, if we offer them to the people living in them, is over $10 million. That's a nice down payment on the start of this project. So I think, well, it might not solve every problem the city has. It'll solve a problem that's a big problem for this city, and I'm looking forward to it. And again, I thank those involved for bringing this forward. It was over needed, and I think nobody wanted to be the one that brought it forward, but somebody did, and I think we're all grateful that happened. So I'm pleased to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. When you look at a map and when you look at the geography, the BSAR connection to Wayne Gretzky Parkway makes the most sense, but geopolitically, it's not going to work. And this amendment frees up money to put towards a solution that is possible in the near future, instead of waiting for something that is going to be a generation or two down the road, if ever. So I'll support the amendment, even though I'm not sure that we need to close the Veterans Memorial Parkway from 2 lanes to 4 lanes between Mount Pleasant and Erie, but that's a project that can come back later if we find that that's needed at a future time.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg.
I got an extra little history lesson from the mayor. I didn't know that small part, so I can see that being a big move on your part. It is the resolution that we've been waiting for, and I believe it's been pitched by the right people who needed to move this resolution forward. The mindset's been there. Certainly, I think that if I had moves a similar resolution forward, it wouldn't get the traction or the overall support because this is a coming and a meeting of the minds and a desire to accomplish something in order to alleviate our traffic issues. And this is the way to do it. And there are a lot of benefits from this. And our ward is actually going to benefit significantly. I don't know if I think the big eye opener for me was the ice jam and the flood. And we discovered all the bridges were low and they're all sitting down in the Fifth Ward. And it's time that we have a bridge that is high in another part of the community so we can get access. And we were literally two communities separated by the river with no way to get around. And that was a real big eye opener. So this is going to allow us for access across. If we didn't make this decision now, I don't think we would have a solution for the future. And certainly going down the path we've been going on, I think we've all seen where that goes. I don't think it's actually possible to have a resolution, an amendment here before me that could make me any happier. No, I'm serious. And one that has a lot of thought into it. And it's going to meet the needs. And there is that you know, to look at something where, I mean, I've looked at that map a million times, trying to find ways to zigzag, because the distance, it was a very short distance to go and a long ways to get there, and we were never going to get there. And we would sit there and we'd say, what if it like this, or what about just like that? There just wasn't a way, no matter how short. And it kind of reminded me of that movie, an old war movie called A Bridge Too Far. It's right there, but you can't get across it. And to me, this almost feels like we're moving into the 21st century, that Brantford's taken a step forward. We are actually tackling a traffic concern, and one that is meeting our new growth, our significant, before, you know what, you play this a little bit, nothing was going to change, nothing was going to happen. We weren't really being affected as a community. But if you look around, and I've heard from the other councillors, Ward 2 is going to benefit. That release on Brant Ave is going to be quite significant. The traffic has been diverted to the 4th Ward. And quite frankly, with or without the BSAR, one way or the other, Ward 5 is kind of cut off. And has been a long time. And that's our success for growth too. So, I mean, I can't see something that brings so much. What I consider, yeah, it's going to cost money. A bridge is going to cost money, a bridge that we need. But this is going to support our road traffic system. I'm really glad to see the staff have kind of let that baby go. But the overall growth of the city is, it's going to, you build that road, wow, you're going to see a lot of prosperity. That's going to drive an economy. There's a lot of benefits. So last term, I really didn't think we were going to get anywhere. And this term, I honestly think we're going to go somewhere. So I'm like I said, couldn't make me happier.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wall.
When I decided to throw my hair into this whole politics game, I was going to say hat, but I don't wear hats. My very, very first meeting was a public meeting held by city staff about the VMP. And the room was full, and there were some really incredibly strong opinions. And there were representatives there from the county, there were people there from the city, Six Nations of the Grand, and there were some really strong opinions. And I was like, this is what I'm in for. And when I was out door knocking, everyone was asking me about the VMP and how we were going to get traffic. And then the mayor signs and his campaign and the whole story. I can't believe I'm sitting here and we're having this conversation right now. I remember when the Chamber of Commerce held their debate in this room, I came to every single one. And the question that they asked to every single person who ran for council in this city was, what are you going to do to get the VMP done? Not what are your alternative plans, what are you going to do to get this impossible project completed? And now we've actually come up with a solution. So to anybody watching at home, to our media partners, to anybody who thinks the political and democratic process doesn't work and that it's too slow, we've been all together now less than 8 months. And look what we're doing. We're clearly fixing a mistake, and we're moving forward with an incredible plan that's going to benefit every single member of our community, our ward. This is amazing. And I'm thankful that I'm here, and I can't believe I get the vote on it. So let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Councillor Vanderstelt for the wrap.
Yeah, there's a phrase that I used in my first term on council. Staff will be familiar with it. I love my people. Just got to love my people. Now I'll bring you into the real numbers. On my campaign literature, I could, at that population that was in over the river at that point, every single day they were losing years, cumulative years of their life in a car or a truck that they didn't need to. And that's time away from economic development in the city of Brantford. You can't shop in the city of Brantford. They take the time to leave earlier and shop outside of the city of Brantford. They would miss their kids. They wouldn't have enough time to cook their dinners. It became an unhealthy lifestyle for some of them. And then we're going to add in another 6,000 cars in the next little while as the full build out is complete out there. And it would have been even worse for not only the people living there, but throughout the rest of the city. Now, it's to put a very honest and fine point on this entire process that I've gone through for the last 8 months. I'm stunned to be able to get the chance to work with staff and with council and be able to pass something that moves around millions of dollars and road work. My first term at council, I couldn't pass a sidewalk. I was afraid to pass gas. I'm extremely happy to come here to work with leaders. And I mean that to each and every one of you, because what you understand is the gravity of this situation as you've understood it for a long period of time. And I thank you for this opportunity, and I thank staff. And we can now, with a straight face, come back to our people, my people, Councillor Weaver's people, and smile. So thank you very much. I'm anticipating a vote, but thank you very much.
Councillor Weaver.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo Councillor Vanderstelt's sentiments to staff. So as council, we steer the ship, but you do all the rowing. And there's been a lot of work done. We've pestered you to get this done as soon as possible. So I think we all appreciate the amount of work that you've put into this. And we thank you, and I'm looking forward to a unanimous vote on this. So, thank you.
All right, let's call the vote. This is on the amendment, yes.
The amendment to item 5.1.3 feasibility study for the Oak Park Road extension is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, and Councillor Wall.
Any discussion on the item as amended? Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Will this amendment and resolution accelerate the Oak Park Road extension? Please say yes. By years.
Through the chair, yes.
Okay. Can you be more specific?
Through the chair, I think what you're doing with the amendment, because you've moved the funding ahead so we can start on the environmental assessment earlier in the process. And that helps with that part of it as well.
And at some point, with the funding from the VMP and the extension from Market to Colborne to Wayne Gretzky Parkway, we may want to consider some of that funds for the Linden Park, Wayne Gretzky Parkway area where there's going to be a lot of commercial development. That may be an option That's been a big sticking point with Costco project and the Ministry of Transportation. So if you've got a few million dollars in an account that could alleviate the ministry's concerns, that may help with that development in that area. Then certainly the people on Brant Ave are going to be, and Ave Road, they're going to be pretty happy about this. Also, I want to add my thanks to Councillors Vanderstoot and Weaver and staff for the good work they've done with this. This is massive, it really is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Davis.
So to speak to the resolution as a whole, I have to say this is probably, I think, for at least three of us, a very satisfying day. The councillors, the ward councillor, Councillor Weaver, working on this for ever since he began his term on council 5 years ago. Councillor Vanderstoot, myself, and the way in which my campaign was structured, the three of us made, as others did as well, to solving this problem. But we in particular made some very specific commitments. It's great that to see that in January, this council unanimously made this project its top priority, and this is a reflection of having done that it's now moving forward, and I don't like to blame people in the past, but let's face it, this should have been done 20 years ago, solving this problem. And so now the dithering, the delay, the buck passing, that's over. The path forward is clear. But I want to temper expectations. Before I say that, another reason why I'm really enthused about this route is, when the BSA was done, and again, I harken back to when I was on council 3 decades ago, really the concept was a southern ring road because the vision at that time was development to the south and the southwest. Well, hey, it's 3 decades later, and now the focus on our community for the future, the next 2 decades, is to the north. And so this is going to give us a key piece, a key start to the northern ring road. It's going to run the 20,000 people living in West Brant, connecting them directly into where all the employment lands are going to be in the next 20 years on the westerly portion of those boundary lands. I expect that we haven't seen it yet in the official plan, but I expect we're going to see that there's going to be a parkway through the northern boundary lands, probably parallel to Power Line Road, connecting likely into the Wayne Gretzky Parkway. And so we're going to have a northern ring road serving the future of our community. And for those that say, well, we don't need expressways, I agree with them. This is not an expressway. It's a parkway similar. It's going to be similar to what you see in the Wayne Gretzky Parkway. And no matter what happens in the way of engines, whether it's hydrogen, electric, people are still going to have vehicles. They're still going to have to travel to their jobs. They're still going to have to travel. And right now, we all know that travel in this city is very difficult because of the impingements on Colburn Corridor, Dalhousie Corridor, Brant Ave. So I think this is a great project. It's great that, but I'll temper the expectation because this route will have challenges. There could be archaeological challenges. We don't know, but we have to begin the process. This is the beginning. Unfortunately, we're not going to be pitching in, digging a shovel in this term of council. But my hope is for those of us who will be in this next council, from 2022 to 2026, that's the council I'm hoping will be cutting the ribbon. Because it's going to take that long, unfortunately, the environmental assessment, the designing, dealing with the bridge crossing, all the government agents we have to deal with. But you know what? We don't get to that ribbon cutting until we start the process. The process has been waiting for 30 years to start. It's starting today for the benefit of this community. And it gives me the greatest of satisfaction to be part of a council that's doing it. So, sorry I'm getting emotional, but it's been a lot.
Councillor Weaver.
Thanks for saying that, Mr. Mayor, because I happen to have a ribbon right here. No, I'm just kidding. Very happy to hear the comments. So what I'm not sure what we're going to call it, but the OPPW, Oak Park Parkway, maybe? There's going to be some discussions around that, I'm sure. Question for staff, though. So how long has the Oak Park Road extension sort of been talked about? How long has this been on the city's books for?
Through the chair, I can't answer exactly the time, but I know that, because before my time here, I think it was one of the regional transportation master plans was done in the city was in the late 90s. And I understand that a corridor, that alignment was developed to represent the boundary between Brantford and Brant County. Established that part. So it's been quite a while.
How long has the Oak Park neighborhood been there for?
Through the chair, when you refer to the Oak Park community, you're talking about the Northwest Industrial Area, or are you talking about?
No, sorry, the residential area, Oak Hill.
Again, I can't answer that. I do know that it's got to going back into the prior to the 90s, so it could be into the 70s, 60s, I don't know.
And when I was reviewing the report with staff, I was pleasantly surprised in the timeframes that we were looking at, because I think, and maybe they were just trying to curb my enthusiasm about the actual project, but it was like a 10-year project. And so what's the reality of what we're looking at as far as what the length of time this is going to take? So first, we're going to have to do an EA, which is 16 months process. Could we maybe just explain what the timelines would be?
Through the chair, I'll ask Tim to come up and speak to it, but you're correct. The timelines for EAs could be in that neighborhood over a year, and then you do have issues that could come out of that in design construction. Tim maybe will give you a better picture on what lines we're looking at for that.
Tinku, Manager of Transportation. Through you, Madam Chair, the timeline for the EA is approximately 12 to 14 months. And then following that, there will be design work, which would take another couple of months. And after that, construction could take around 5 to 7 years.
Okay. So this report and our decision is going to be ratified and voted on the 27th. So does that mean on the 28th, we're going to have an RFQ out or an RFP out to get the work started for someone to come in and do the assessment for us?
Through the chair, staff is already anticipating some sort of RFP is required, so we are working in the background at least to get the skeleton done. It won't be quite ready as soon as you approve it, but we are anticipating to get the RFP out in Q4 of this year, so by end of this year.
Great. Okay. And again, thank you very much to you and your staffs for the work you've put into this.
Thank you. Councillor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you. We're building infrastructure that will still be here in 100 years, long after this term of council rises, at which time there may be other modes of transportation that we'll want to move through this corridor. So given the configuration we've got, we're looking at a 2 to 4 meter median between the northbound and southbounds. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to ensure that the median might accommodate future transportation modes, which probably would require more than 4 meters.
Through the chair, the median could be used in many different purposes, including turning lane and potentially other modes that could emerge in the future.
What dimension would be required for light rail transit?
For two-way rapid transit, we're looking at probably, excluding the station space, probably minimum 7 meters.
Should we maybe be shooting for a larger median? I know
chair,
you're not going to be around then, but you know.
Through the chair, the possibility can be explored during the environmental assessment period. This process will allow the public input, such as one you have suggested.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Is the plan to stage this and do 2 lanes initially, and then do the other 2 lanes at a later time?
Through the chair, currently there hasn't been a set plan in terms of staging, but that is a possibility, so that could be explored as an option down the road if funding becomes a constraint. This could offer us that flexibility. But the initial plan is to
construct the entire 4-lane section from the get-go if possible.
Okay, and would it speed things up to do 2 lanes initially and then open that section and then while the other 2 lanes are being built?
Through the chair, possibly. There may be some staging advantages depending on which alternative is picked. The advantage might be smaller for one alternative versus another, so we don't really want to exclude any possibility at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further speakers, let's call the vote on this item as amended.
Item 5.1.3, feasibility study for the Oak Park Road extension as amended is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor McCurry, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, and Councillor Wall.
Okay, the next item we are looking at is 5.1.13 Banbury Road parking control. We have an amendment. Councillor Carpenter has an amendment on this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This resolution requires a direction, so it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McCurry only because my ward mate's in the chair, that Clause B of item 5.1.13 Banbury Road parking control be amended to read as follows. That option 2 is as follows, as contained in section 8 of the report 2019-42 be approved, that alternate side of street parking on Banbury Road remain in place, and that the following be added as Clause C, that a 40-kilometer-hour posted speed limit be bylawed on Banbury Road from Brentwood Park Road South intersection to Brentwood Park Road North intersection in Schedule 8 of the traffic bylaw 3783, which pertains to speed regulations, be amended and provided to council for approval. And so just saying, we had a number of ward meetings. The majority of the residents attending the meeting wanted the parking on Banbury to remain the same, and one of the questions that came up during that public meeting was, let's lower that speed limit to 40 kilometers. And the original resolution had 40 kilometers from one, not covering all of Banbury. And it doesn't make sense to the ward councillors to have part of one street at 40 kilometers, not all of it. Thank you.
Anyone on the amendment? I'll call the vote on the amendment.
Item 5.1.13 Banbury Road parking control. The amendment is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor McCurry, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, noting Councillor Walls out of the room.
Any discussion on this item as amended? Seeing none, call the vote.
Item 5.1.13 Banbury Road parking control as amended is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor McCurry, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, noting Councillor Walls out of the room.
Okay, now we're moving on to 5.1.4 funding for private sanitary sewer lateral replacement grant program. Councillor Martin.
Yes, thank you. A question through to staff. Is there any requirement with this program to ensure that there are no stormwater connections to the sanitary system?
Through you, Madam Chair, Selvi Congera, Director, Environmental Services. So the sanitary is usually videoed, and so it's and also requires a clean out, and the installation is inspected. So any storm connection, we would see it part of our inspection process.
So that would ensure that there's no weeping tile connected to the sanitary or no downspouts that feed into it.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other speakers, we'll call the vote.
Item 5.1.4, funding for private sanitary sewer lateral replacement grant program is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor McCurry, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilborg, noting that Councillors Wall and Vanderstel are out of the room.
Okay, next item is 5.1.6, amending on-street parking regulations policy, and that is Councillor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Council will remember that we brought a resolution some time ago asking staff to create a policy that would offer clarity to some of the ongoing concerns we've had about how we deal with parking changes recommended by staff and by members of the community. And I want to thank staff for responding with the report that's before us today. With the leave of the chair, I would like to suggest that we refer this back to staff to get some more clarity with respect to the workflow diagram that we have. And directing staff to show us the different streams with respect to who initiates the request. Currently, we have one stream which seems to indicate that all requests, whether they come from staff, community, or council, is treated in the same fashion, and I think we need greater clarity. So that's what I would propose now, Madam Chair, is that we refer this to staff for that clarity.
And we've got Councillor Weaver that seconded this. Do we have any discussion on this? Referral? Okay, well, sorry.
Thank
yes.
you. Through the chair, I may ask if we could attempt to answer your inquiry? Or are you looking for something?
I didn't make an inquiry.
Oh, I thought you...
Yeah. But Madam Chair, through you to staff, perhaps Councillor Weaver and I, as the mover and seconder, could meet with the acting GM, and we could resolve this and show you quite what we're looking for, Ross. Okay, thank you.
Merits of the referral, Councillor Carpenter. Okay, we'll call the vote on the referral.
The referral of item 5.1.6 back to staff, amending on-street parking regulations policy, is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Utley, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilborg, Councillor Wall, noting Councillor Sless was out of the room.
All right, next we have 5.1.8, King and Benton Redevelopment Parkside Drive Subdivision Agreement, and this is Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question through to staff. There were a number of public meetings regarding this development that took place some months ago. And at that time, there was a lot of concern raised about large trucks hauling fill, because there's a lot of filling to be done on this property. And it was agreed that the trucks would access the lots on Parkside Drive via the rail trail that the owner of that property owns as well, and keeping the streets clean and keeping the dirt off the streets. And I was told that staff are not supportive of that because there's infrastructure below that rail line. And I don't understand the logic. It supported train traffic all those years, but now it can't support a truck. And I'd like to know the reasoning behind that.
Gary Peaver, Manager of Development Engineering, through your chair. Staff are looking at those options of the truck routes because of the excessive sized water main that's under it. It's a 750 millimeter water main. Mm-hmm. At the time of installation, the tracks were there. Now they have been removed and grades have been changed since then. So staff is not necessarily not recommending that truck route, but to look at that in a little more detail to ensure that that infrastructure is protected and that we can use that as a route. We've been working with the developer to ensure a truck route is established, both there and returned. Currently, those details haven't been ironed out between city staff and the developer, but we are looking at that option. And through initial review, as of today, we are accepting that truck route to the site. We just need a little more detail of the protection of that existing water main.
Okay, well, that's a relief to hear because the neighborhood was very, very concerned about all the dirt and debris that would undoubtedly end up out on the street if we were trucking in, hundreds of loads of fill going into a site and in the middle of a residential area when there is an alternate route to take that was at that time deemed appropriate to be doing. So it sounds like you're on the right track, that we will be approving that. They will be going in the back, and there's no reason for the neighborhood to get up in arms because the trucks will be taking the train route. Is that correct?
Through your chair, yes, they will be taking that route. However, we do have to look at the turning movement of the trucks and how they could return back to the existing fill site.
Yeah, it's a long way to go backwards.
It's a long way to go backwards and not necessarily safe. So those details have not been ironed out or proposed by the developer just yet. However, we will have a meeting to discuss that, and we'll also get back to the councilors to get that back to the residents of what that truck route may look like, whether or not a truck needs to turn around in a certain way, or if they do need to use the road to return back to the fill location.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Gary. I'm really pleased to hear that there's some dialogue going on between city staff and the developer on the truck route. I know, echo Councillor Slessy's words, that the people that live in that section of Parkside do not want to see trucks going past their houses too much. So it looks like it's moving forward. The project is moving forward, and I want to thank staff for your support in this project as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. Do I read this correctly? This is 13 building lots?
Through your chair, yes.
And is block 14, is that developable too as well?
Through your chair, there's potential for that to be developed. That would still have to go through a planning process, though.
Okay, I just want to remind the viewing public that this was land, the railway land, that the city had an opportunity to purchase for $3 million and for some reason did not. And this is probably about $3 million worth of land right here, just a little piece. And we would have been able to recoup our money and then have all the trails and accesses that we should have had we purchased the railway land ourselves. Thank you. Let's point out that monumental area.
Okay, seeing, Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gary, in situations like this, do we often employ the use of a mud bed, like an extended mud bed, in order to clear out the grooves in the tires on the way out of a build, of an insert build like this?
Through your chair, yes. Typically, a mud mat is used on a site. This will get a little difficult in the confined space, as this site is not actually constructing any new roads. So a lot of the material is going to be on the placement of where the units are going to be installed. On a much larger site, a mud mat is way more effective. Here, there will be restrained because of the location and the tight turning movements that the trucks may have to look at. Again, when we sit down with the developer's contractor and look at different alternatives, we'll be able to try to do the best we can to implement a mud mat and other siltation control devices.
Great, thank you again.
Councillor Utley, second.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is one more thing that we discussed, and that is parking on that section of Parkside. And there was concern raised, I think, at one of the meetings that we had with the public, that they did not want to see parking on both sides of the street. So if we can incorporate that into the plan at some point, parking one side only, and I think that's on the side of the existing homes. Correct me if I'm, on the other side where the new homes are proposed to go, the people that live on that street did not want to see parking on that. They felt it would be too tight going through there. So I just wanted to pass that along. Thanks, Gary.
Through your chair, thank you.
Okay, I have no other speakers. We'll call the vote on this, please.
Item 5.1.8, King and Benton Redevelopment Corporation Parkside Drive subdivision agreement is approved on a recorded vote of 10-1. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Mayor Weaver, or Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Martin, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, Councillor Wall. Those against, Councillor Carpenter.
Okay, next we have 5.1.9, options for road painting methods. This is you, Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for staff. So for the benefit of the audience, this is a report that talks about, I think it was Council McCreary's initiative, that we look at what we can do to make the lines on our roads last longer and be more visible at night and during rainstorms. So this report tells us about things we can do in the future to improve the lifespan and visibility of our pavement lane marking. But there is one, it's under section 9, that says, with the enhancements of the 2019 pavement marking retracing contract, line markings increased by 12 cents per meter to 35 cents per meter and increased the total cost by approximately $100,000. So that's a threefold increase in the cost of our lane marking program. But the report doesn't really tell me, so what were those improvements we built into the 2019 contract that's costing us 3 times what it cost us, I guess, last year?
Through you, Madam Chair, Jason Warren, Manager of Traffic Operations and Parking. That information actually is found on page 6, so I can see your confusion. As you were talking, it's highlighted, so some key changes to the 2019, it's on page 6, if you actually have the report there. So one of the things is enhanced quality of oversight. We're also updated to follow the current Ontario provincial specifications. The one we had in the past was a little bit outdated. We're also holding the contractor to a work schedule. Last year, the contractor didn't have a schedule and we fell into December and we actually didn't even get everything done. So now this year, it's a September 14th deadline. So that ensures that we get all our painting done during the best weather, and also gives us a little bit of a cushion in case things go over. The other one is an environmental compliance expectation. Last year, our contractor painted in not so desirable weather. It rained. We had paint running down the roadways. So we enhanced the contract to ensure that there is clause in there that says if that does happen, there's, what was it actually? It wasn't penalties, but it was, they have to clean it up and it's all their responsibility. And then also enhanced vendor performance. So we actually have a holdback on $20,000. And so if they decided to not finish the contract last year like they did, we really didn't have anything in place to push them to get things done. This year, they actually have to give us $20,000, and then we can find another contractor to complete the work. So if we were to go out and try to get some of this work done last minute in September, all the other contractors are out there busy doing their own work and finishing up in their own municipalities, so they wouldn't be able to help us out. So this actually allows us some lenience to be able to get the work done.
Thank you, Jason, for that explanation. So better oversight. We've learned from the experiences last year. We have better control over our contractor. And also I read that, so the thickness and the bead rate is these glass beads that are in the paint, right?
Yeah.
And so they're better embedded and there's more of them, I assume, or better quality, so the line should be more visible at night. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Great, okay, great, thanks very much.
Councillor Vanderstel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, so B, development of an asset tracking database. What is there a portion of a budget that's allocated to developing that database?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, there is nothing today to be able to do that.
Okay, can we not use our current GIS system and just put another layer on it?
Yes, we could be doing that. However, to actually generate that, we'd have to have an inventory completed. So this year, we're having an inventory completed of all our traffic signs, and that cost is, I'd have to get you the exact cost, but I believe it's between $100,000 and $150,000.
Okay, I understand that part of it, but as we award contracts and as the better quality of paint is completed per contract, I mean, it's just a matter of adding in the better quality sections of road that we've done into GIS, right? You don't have to redevelop an entirely new database to keep track of this, do you?
No, we don't have to open up a new database, but for moving forward, but to find out all the existing,
Okay.
yes, that's all.
All right, understood. Thank you.
Councillor McCrory?
Madam Chair, thank you. Welcome, guys. Do I extrapolate from the report that we had not supervised the work or inspected the work previously?
Through you, Madam Chair, I wouldn't say that we didn't oversee it. Now we're making them aware that we are, and Chris has been, supervisor of traffic operations, has been dedicating a significant amount of time at night overseeing directly that the work is being completed. So
Now,
we're
can you
devoted.
further define the word overseeing? Are you inspecting completed work? Is that what you're doing? Okay.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, okay. So previously, who verified completion of work for payment?
Through you, Madam Chair, Chris Gimmer, Supervisor of Traffic. We've always done oversight on it. It was not as extensive as we did this year. Because of the volume of painting, we did spot checks, area checks, quality control as far as, yes, it was painted, no, it wasn't painted, and that extent. This year, we, through the past few years, we've had a consultant in, but we've upped the consultant's amount of inspections he's doing as well. Spot checks, not letting the painters know he's coming in, and they are doing quality checks as well, which includes thickness of the paint, width of the lines, proper spacing, and then with myself going out as well, it's just random spot checks to make sure everything's done. We are going out this year and inspecting all locations like stop bars, crosswalks, to make sure they are fully painted.
Are they providing you with purchase records for the paint itself to indicate the vendor that's providing them the paint?
We do that through the consultant. The consultant is responsible for that. So they provide sample of glass beads, sample of white paint, sample of yellow paint, plus manufacturer's records.
Okay. Now, you indicated that your previous contractor defaulted. Last year's contractor didn't finish the work. Is that what you said?
Yes, that is correct.
Do we have a performance bond?
Yes, that is correct.
Did we get relief from the failure to complete the contract?
Sorry, did you, can you repeat what, did you say performance bond?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, no, we did not have that last year.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't have had that? Just an oversight?
It just wasn't done.
Okay. Is that in place now for this current year?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And so have you already tendered the work for this year?
Correct.
And I'm pretty sure I've seen some fresh paint out there.
Yeah, they look good.
Yeah. How do they look at night?
Through the chair, it looks excellent this year.
Good show.
The lines are better thickness. the proper width through the inspection process. They're also inspecting reflectivity on them, so the glass beads, the embedment of the beads, even the quality of the straightness of the lines following the existing, so we don't get too much overlap or overlay.
It is the way of the world that if you do not properly exercise a contract, the contractor will soon learn to what extent he can skimp, and the fault in that is all our own, right? Thank you guys for getting this work done, and really, this is going to make a difference to the community, especially the people that are driving on North Park Street after a snowstorm. That's really going to make a huge difference in terms of usability of that street. So can't thank you enough for the work you've done on this, okay?
Thank you. You're welcome.
Councillor Martin.
Question through the staff. With the increased oversight and the better quality of work that we're getting, is there any chance that some of this paint will start to last 2 years so that we don't have to do every line every year and possibly save some money?
Through you, Madam Chair, is typically paint only lasts a year. Now, with that being said, a lot of it is dependent on the type of surface, so the road, the type of asphalt, traffic on it, the volume of traffic, the classification of traffic, the amount of amount of salt that we put down, and the grinding almost like a sandpaper on top of it. All of those have some bearing on how long paint will last. Now, on some of our roadways with less volume, that's something that we want to explore as we move forward, so we can devote more of our resources to the higher class roads.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we will call the vote on this one. Thank you, gentlemen.
Item 5.1.9, options for road painting methods is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstout, Councillor Utley, Councillor Celeste, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, Councillor Wall, noting that Councillor McCreary has left the meeting.
All right, next item is 5.1.12 Winfield West Subdivision Phase 7B Parking Control. Councillor Vanderstout.
Thank you, Chair. Just a gentle reminder, I think, to staff, we occasionally have to do this. The Brantford map is legible. The Winfield map is less than legible. The Banbury map is really good. Actually, there's two maps that you can read on the council agenda that you can read quite well. Just a hopeful and a gentle reminder that it's an awful lot easier when I can read the numbers and the letters and the surrounding area on these maps. I would appreciate being able to read them all. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Weaver.
Thank you. And so just by, I guess, chance, I have to ask staff about when are these parking signs going to be installed? I think you know why I'm asking.
Through you, Madam Chair, the installation of the sign will be coordinated with the contractor of the developer. Therefore, it is depending on the approval of this bylaw as well as their availability. So we will be, of course, aiming to have them installed sooner rather than later, preferably before any occupation of the homes around the area.
So I think, I think not having them installed before occupation is a hard stop for me. Obviously, that I've had some tremendous issues because signs were installed a year after people lived in an area, and I'm still dealing with those issues to this day. So, I mean, we really can't take the chance of not having that done. We need to have those signs installed before anybody moves into their home. And preferably when they're showing houses. The earlier the better. So whatever we can do to make sure that happens, please. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further speakers, we'll call the vote on this one, please.
Item 5.1.12, Winfield West Subdivision Phase 7B Parking Control is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelp, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sleth, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilborg, Councillor Wall, noting that Councillors McCreary and Martin have both left the meeting.
And I believe we're on the last separated item. We have 5.1.15 Wall of Recognition inductees 2019 to 2022. Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a question for the committee chairperson, and I wanted council members to be aware that pay attention to paragraph C. So A deals with the modern day candidates to be inducted. B deals with the historical candidates to be inducted. That's fine. C is the existing wall of recognition be replicated in its current format in the new city hall in a prominent location. So, I know we dealt with that at the accommodation task force meeting, one of them. I recall there being, maybe we should do this electronically, maybe it should look a bit different than what we're currently using. I didn't think we'd really come to a conclusion on how to deal with that. But this seems to, well, it doesn't seem, it does. It's saying we're going to do the very same thing. So I'm just wondering why the committee decided to do that. And well, I guess I know what the rationale is, but why this process rather than going through the accommodation task force where we had actually mock-ups of what it would look like. Because there was talk about, so for the viewers, the way it's done right now is every individual person recognizes there's a picture and there's a little blurb underneath about what they did. There was some thought about, given that we weren't quite certain what we're going to be doing in the foyer of the new city hall, maybe we might want to do something that's more electronic, interactive, where there'd be more information about each individual person. But anyways, I thought we wanted to be a bit innovative in our new city hall, and so I'm concerned that we seem to be just taking what we have here and then just sticking up in the wall there, that maybe we need to give some thought to that.
I'm just going to go to Councillor. Sorry, were you done? Sorry, Mayor
Directly, I
Davis.
believe, so I was just wondering if,
Councillor Utley.
I got a question for Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Mayor. The task force, the Wall of Recognition Task Force talked about this at some length, and I don't believe I heard much support for an electronic version. We could have both, but certainly it was I think the majority of the task force that wanted what's here now duplicated in the new city hall.
Madam Chair, can I ask for a vote on that? Can I ask for that to be separated? Because, what it says is be replicated in its current format. So those are very particular, specific words, which means take exactly what we have here and do exactly the same over there. That's how I interpret that. And I think we should be a little more open to something that might be somewhat different and more in keeping with whatever the architectural and technological theme is going to be of that foyer. So I understand what the task force is trying to do, but I'm thinking maybe we're putting the cart before the horse.
Yes, we can separate C when we get to the vote. Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Antosky. Yeah, I was actually going to ask for C and D to be, because if you're going to do C, you have to do D as well, because it's referenced in C. But I know during the accommodation task force, this came up, and I spoke in favor of an electronic version. So right now, what we have out in the foyer, we have some great pictures. I think those pictures need to be protected, which would be digitizing them to make sure they don't fade any more than they already are faded. And the other thing that really concerns me with what we have there, so we only have so many frames that we purchased at one point in time to put these pictures in. So we're about to move into a new city hall that we all want to look professional. And in the main foyer, when people are going to be looking at photos of our history, they're going to be different frames. We're not going to be able to keep it consistent like it has been. I would much rather see more rich information provided on those members of council. And I think the best way to do that is in a digital format rather than just having the photos there. So I won't be supporting C or D. And I'm hoping to, again, speak for a digital process where we can make sure that the photos are kept in perpetuity and they're not going to degrade any more than they have already.
Thank you, Councillor Wall.
So I was on this committee, and I'll share what I shared with that committee. I remember as a kid, I walked into City Hall, and I saw those faces up on the wall, and it inspired me to figure out who those people were, and how powerful that image is to somebody who's a stranger. I mean, to us, we walk in here every day and see it. To just, average Joe on the street who walks into City Hall, those are the civic leaders who help build this city. The only way I could compare it is that the internet exists, and there's an unlimited amount of information available on the internet, but how am I ever going to know what I'm supposed to look up? I could just randomly start going through encyclopedia pages to find information, but I'm more likely to look something up because I saw something about it. So, I mean, I'm all for an amendment to this to say replicate it in its current form in an iteration or like a minor wording change so it's not literally copy-pasting what's out there in the hallway. And I'm all for moving an amendment that would encourage some sort of digital recreation. And I mean, we could buy new frames, right? I just think that you have to make it simple. You have to show off all the people. And you need to remember that. We can't just take it away. So, I mean, maybe a combination of both. I can't imagine walking into a city hall that didn't have the pictures of all the people who were a part of it. That's what I said at the committee, and that's what I'm saying here. Both are valid. I don't think it should be one or the other.
Councillor Carpenter.
As a member of that committee, I think it was Councillor McCreary that moved this recommendation, if I recall. The concern that we have, and just so you know, pay attention to item D, it says that C above be forwarded to the accommodation task force, that the recommendation be forwarded to the accommodation task force. What was the concern was of the committee was that this would just be lost. And it may not come up again at the accommodation task force meeting at all, and we may move into City Hall and say, geez, we forgot about that. Now here we got this is how it's done. We weren't consulted on it, or may not have been consulted on it, and it may have happened. So we just didn't want to lose it. That was important to us. So if you read this correctly, it's a recommendation to the accommodation task force. So it's saying this subject matter, we recommend this, but it's going to the accommodation task force. And that accommodation task force process will be a discussion about whether that works or doesn't work. So some of us are concerned about, as Councillor Wallace said, that you've got this digitized process that you got to turn the button on to find out about. So you don't even know that it exists unless you know what to do, as Councillor Wallace has been saying. When you keep saying they're going to be lost, the digital format in the future is what's going to be lost. People, I've got boxes and boxes of photos at home because there wasn't digitized information back then. And so now, people's digital photos that they have now, they're going to lose them. They're not going to have the memory because they're digitized and they either didn't download them into a hard drive or the hard drive eventually failed. They're going to lose the information and they're not going to have the pictures because pictures that we have today are paper. They're touchable. They're not electronic. They don't disappear. So there's that to consider as well. Now, digitize isn't the answer to everything, by the way, that format necessarily. So this recommendation is about forward, so at least we have a say on what we're going to do. I think the committee was really concerned, as I was, that we would lose this altogether. And it wouldn't, so if you want to move recommendation that this subject matter and adjust it so that subject matter goes to the committee, the combination committee, so that we're sure what it would look like. Because we heard from, staff that they were going to decide naming of rooms, color of paint, different things that we weren't necessarily involved in. And that raised the concern that something would happen that council didn't have a say in. And this is an important matter for council because it's recognizing former councillors that have done good work in this community, and that's what this committee is all about. If you don't want to do that, then you don't want to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm fully supportive of Clause C. As one that goes to the Gretzky Center about 4 nights a week all winter with grandchildren, when you go into the Sports Hall of Recognition, everybody walks through and looks at all the pictures and sees all the memorabilia and sees all those things. And then you see this stand where you can push buttons and access people. Nobody's ever there. They don't use it. They go through, they want to just walk through and see what's what. And these are out-of-town people for the most part. A lot of Brantford people go in as well. But when there's tournaments and things going on, that place is packed. And yet the area where you push buttons to access information, nobody's there. They want to see something visual. And they walk through and they see it. They all sit and they watch the automatic TV screen that shows the 100 top things that Wayne Gretzky did. They sit in rows to watch that because they do nothing. They just have to walk in, sit down, and it's there. But to go and access and physically have to do something to find out something, they don't do it. So we spend a lot of money up there. Or actually, I think the task force that looks after that, the group that looks after that, raised a lot of money to put that digital stuff in there, and unfortunately it just collects dust because people don't look at it. And anybody that's digitized up there doesn't get their fair due. They were put into the Hall of Recognition, but they don't get recognition because nobody sees it. It's the folks that are displayed that get all the recognition and get seen. So I would hate to see what's out in the hall somehow disappear to a station that has a button and a screen because nobody's going to look at it, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to go back a little while. Some years ago, there was no committee in place for the Wall of Recognition, and there were sort of playing catch up with all the past mayors and councillors from way back in the early 1900s. And we've got a ways to go yet with that. So I think I want to thank the committee members for all the good work and the Heritage Committee for doing some research work, and especially Councillor Newman. He was really instrumental in going back and finding out the history and the past of some of our former mayors and councillors. And now we sort of have a conflict between the Wall of Recognition Committee and the Accommodation Task Force, which has responsibility for designing the interior and the exterior of the interior of the new City Hall. So I see a little bit of a conflict there, and as I was thinking through this process, our responsibility on the Wall of Recognition Task Force has been to identify and recommend names to go on the Wall of Recognition. And I don't think we ever thought about how and where they're going to be displayed, other than we like what we got, and let's try and duplicate that as much as possible in the new City Hall. So I hope we get I hope this gets approved. I'm not against some sort of electronic format, but I definitely like the permanency of seeing people have given their lives and many hours to this community, and I think they deserve to be displayed appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Davis.
All right, well, what I'm concerned about is the process. I mean, these words are be replicated almost exactly in its current format. It's a decision made by a portion of the council members, and when this goes to council, it'll be endorsed, and it's going to be pretty hard to change it, the city's accommodation task force. The decision is being made without having the full benefit of knowing what the options are, because I assume staff weren't ready to show the committee what the various options were. So I think we're making a decision that is going to be in that foyer for many years. It's an important decision in that we're recognizing those who provided exceptional service. And I'm just wondering, what's the problem with, we just simply insist the accommodation task force deal with it, which I think is what Councillor Carpenter was saying, rather than dictating to the city accommodation task force, this is what we're going to do, regardless of what anything else might look like. Because we really haven't seen all the options. So I'm not being critical, just critical of the process that seems to me you're kind of short-circuiting what would be a good decision-making process, not simply assuming what electronic might look like would be, and actually seeing what it would look like and what the options might be. Because my understanding was that our city accommodation task force meeting, they were going to give that to us at our next meeting. So I just like to have all the information, knowing what all the options are and what they all look like, and before making, giving the city staff overseeing this that very specific direction about what to do. So I won't support it.
Councillor Vanderstel.
When the queue is empty, I'd like to move a deferral to staff accommodation. Can have a more fulsome discussion at that point when we know what all our options are.
There's a lot to the history of the city council. There's a picture behind the chair that I'd consider very important, and I wouldn't want to just see that as in a digital format. Digital formats, that's fine, but when it comes right down to it, it's got to be tactile. It's got to be visual. That's your history there, and that's what's being put on the wall, and that's what people do stop and see. Yeah, you can put a little digital replica to archive it, or to throw it up on Facebook. But quite frankly, that's not all that. It's a different kind of information. When you see it and you look on that wall, there's an elevation that takes place, a respect, a wall of recognition, and that's exactly what happens when you see it. You take it in and you recognize those people. When you digitize it or you put it, say, up on Facebook or social media or even in Wikipedia, you're not actually, it's not recognition as much as it is information, or you're searching for stuff, or you're not going to pay any attention. I kind of agree with Councillor Celeste in that, if it's not there for people to go and to reflect upon, I can't see them going to go pushing buttons or sliding across. When I read this, I didn't see anything other than people seeing what we have here and just saying, what I don't want you to do is go and shove these pictures down in the basement somewhere or in a room that nobody goes to, and then they're here, but no one's going to see them. That can happen, and I could see, So I think this is more like the whole purpose, prominent location. What you want to do is you want to reflect the intent of what that wall is, and so be replicated. I don't know. This is where I think those with a legal background really look at words, and those like me, just counselor, saying, "Yeah, I want to see that same thing set up over there," and that's what I want to see. So I know words matter, but I don't find these words to be handcuffing, or they certainly don't say things though like, if you remove them, if you take away and you leave it where I never thought that somebody would be saying, we could possibly get rid of the pictures and we'll just have a digital box there or digital input. And you know what? That's, for me, that's just a turn off. That's the off button. So I wouldn't want that. So it's funny when you take something away. I go, really? That those kind of options, they don't actually make me feel any better. So I'm not fearful of what's here. I didn't see anything threatening for what's here. I saw a reflection to honor those that are on our wall as the only intent. And I believe in those words, that there's probably a lot more leeway, and I'm sure that if somebody can figure out proper wording for them that doesn't feel as binding to those that are fixated on those words, that there's a way to move all those spaces over to the new building and be honored and respected.
Thank you. We're on to second time speakers. Councillor Wall.
So I got to really get better at making bold statements versus just saying words. I want to move an amendment to this. Can I do that?
Yes, you can. Could we wait for the other speakers, or do you want to move the amendment now?
I'd like to do it now.
Okay.
So C,
There are two other speakers in the queue.
I mean, I'd like to have an opportunity to move the amendment before we move the referral or deferral.
That's fine. I can come back to you after we have the other speakers. Thank you. Councillor Carpenter is next.
Well, I was going to move an amendment to make this all work, but I'll wait now for Councillor Wall's amendment and to Councillor Wall, though, anytime you want to move an amendment, it's in order.
Councillor Weaver.
Thank you for the courtesy of allowing people that are in the queue to talk. So I think when people are talking about a digital wall of fame, I think people are thinking of like a monitor with pictures that, you know, every 5 seconds they flash. That's not what I'm envisioning. In fact, what I'm envisioning, to be perfectly honest, was probably going to cost more money than what we have today, because I'm looking at multiple screens. I'm looking at the ability for us to add information to really showcase what the folks did that are on our wall of fame, rather than just having a picture and a name and a date. I think there's some work that can be done. At the Accommodations Committee, I mentioned that this would be an excellent project for the Heritage Committee to start reviewing and looking at some of our past political people and really getting a nice little blurb about what they did for our city while they were on council or in the mayor's chair. So there's you know, people go around and they talk, and I think they assume that we're trying to dumb this down. I'm actually trying to make it more expansive, have the ability to have more information, so people have and know why those people are so important to our community. So, you know, did they open streets? Did they open malls? Did they change the name to, you know, Wayne Gretzky Boulevard? What did they do? Right now, it doesn't say that at all. It relies on you to take a look at the picture and then remember the picture and then use your phone or go home and go on the computer. I'm actually looking to have this interactive and have the information here in front of everybody. So it's usable. It's something that I think will get used a lot. So I'm not just, again, trying to dumb this down. I'm really just trying to enhance it. And so that's why I won't be supporting C and D, but I will be supporting a deferral, because I think at the Accommodation Task Force, I think that's the proper location to have this conversation.
Councillor Wall.
So I do appreciate the clarification. So my amendment was just going to be to replace the word replicated with recreate, and then current format to similar format, and then to add to investigate creating a interactive digital display. And then D, which I believe just simply says that this go to the Accommodations Task Force. So again, the amendment would be to replace the word replicated with recreate, and then current to similar, so that the existing wall of recognition be recreated in a similar format in the new City Hall in a prominent location, and that they investigate the creation of a digital information display.
you have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Van Tilburg. Any more discussion?
I can't see why we can't have our cake and eat it too.
I beg your pardon? Sorry, I didn't hear it.
I think we can have our cake and eat it too. I think there's merit and it's valid for us to have both.
Councillor Carpenter.
I'll speak to the amendment changing the, I would have preferred if we would have said something like that the existing wall of recognition be replicated in its current format in the new city hall and a prominent location be considered as one of the options and be referred to the accommodation task force. Then what we don't do is lose the concept. And if there's something better out there that somebody can convince us of, then fine. Then the task force will make another recommendation out of that. What's done here is changed it to take the word replicated out. Doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me, so I can't support the amendment as it sits. I think the concern was that this was going to be final, and this was our final decision. And what I heard around the table was that we needed some freedom to decide maybe if somebody can convince us of something better than this. And all the committee was trying to do was to protect what we have there until we know we're convinced of something better. And that we were involved in that. And that's why this came forward. So, I can't support the current amendment on the floor.
So, Councillor Carpenter, you suggested some wording. Are you suggesting an amendment to the amendment?
No, because the amendment has removed words from the original resolution. And all I want to do is take the original resolution and make it an option instead of a must.
Okay, so we'll see what happens with this amendment and come back. Any other speakers on Councillor Utley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can't support digitizing what we have right now at this point. I can accept it as an option in addition to what we have, which may work, but I can't support either or. I support what we have now, and I love the word replicate. It can be interpreted in a number of different ways. It's just one of duplicate. We could have used 2, 3, 4 words. Anyhow, thank you.
Okay, any other speakers on the amendment? All right, we'll call the vote.
The amendment to item 5.1.15, Wall of Recognition inductees 2019 to 2022. The amendment has failed on a recorded vote of 6-3. Those in favor, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Van Tilburg, and Councillor Wall. Those against, Mayor Davis, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor Carpenter, and Councillor Antosky.
Okay, as amended, more speakers. Councillor Carpenter.
It's not amended yet, but
I'm sorry.
I'd like to move an amendment, and I want to try my amendment, that the existing wall of recognition be replicated in its current format in New City Hall in a prominent location be one of the recommendations considered by the city's accommodation task force. We don't lose it. We're not bound by it. Are they seeking a seconder?
Councillor Utley is your seconder. Any discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, we'll call the vote.
The amendment to 5.1.15 Wall of Recognition inductees has carried on a recorded vote of 8-1. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, Councillor Wall. Those against, Councillor Vanderstelt.
All right, and as amended, this item, do we still need to, are we still looking to separate C and D? No? Retracted that, all right, we're going to vote on it as a whole. As amended, yes.
Item 5.1.15, wall of recognition and inductees is approved, as amended, is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilor Weaver, Councilor Vanderstelt, Councilor Utley, Councilor Sless, Councilor Carpenter, Councilor Antosky, Councilor Van Tilburg, and Councilor Wall.
Okay, we are on to resolutions. Councilor Vanderstelt, please move item 6.1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you like me to read it as well? Okay. Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Weaver. Colburn Street West signal crosswalk, whereas pedestrian crossing opportunities across Colburn Street West are more than 500 meters apart between Oak Hill Drive and Canning Street, and whereas additional crossing opportunities would improve walkability, encourage healthy activity, and promote pedestrian safety. That's the big one, promote pedestrian safety. And whereas there is an existing traffic signal on Colburn Street West between Oak Hill Drive and Canning Street at the Brantford Fire Station number 4 driveway, and whereas the traffic signal at Brantford Fire Station 4 currently provides preemption for fire response only, and whereas a new pedestrian crossing may be retrofitted at the traffic signal location, now therefore be it resolved, A, that staff be authorized to retrofit the traffic signal at the Brantford Fire Station 4 driveway to include a pedestrian crossing and necessary connections to existing sidewalks, and B, that staff be directed to bring forward the necessary bylaw amendments to council for adoption, and C, that the implementation costs for design and construction in 2020 not to exceed $20,000 be submitted as an unmet need as part of the 2020 estimates process.
Thank you. Any discussion? Call the vote, please.
Item 6.1, Colborne Street West signaled crosswalk is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilor Weaver, Councilor Vanderstelt, Councilor Utley, Councilor Sless, Councilor Carpenter, Councilor Antosky, Councilor Van Tilburg, and Councilor Wall.
Item 6.2, Councilor Sless, could you please move this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Utley. Whereas St. George Street is a collector road within a residential neighborhood, and whereas St. George Street has a speed limit of 40 kilometers between Henderson Ave and Barnes Ave, Hillier Crescent North, and whereas St. George Street has a default speed limit of 50 kilometers north of Barnes to Tollgate Road, and whereas a petition has been received by the clerk's office in City Hall on June 26, 2019, signed by 27 residents to lower the speed limit to 40 kilometers on St. George between Barnes and Tollgate. Now therefore be it resolved that the speed limit be changed to 40 kilometers on St. George Street between Barnes Avenue and Tollgate Road, and the staff be directed to bring forth the necessary bylaw to amend pertaining to this resolution for council adoption. And basically what this is, Madam Chair, there's a section of road, there's one block in a 4-block area that isn't 40 kilometers in a school zone, and it's kind of an orphan at the end of a street. It doesn't make sense, so it's really just cleaning up something that should have been cleaned up.
Thank you. Any discussion? Call the vote, please.
Item 6.2, extension of 40 kilometers an hour speed limit, St. George from Hillier Crescent to Tollgate Road is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. All those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilor Weaver, Councilor Vanderstelt, Councilor Utley, Councilor Sless, Councilor Carpenter, Councilor Antosky, Councilor Van Tilburg, and Councilor Wall.
Thank you. 6.3, this is my resolution. If I could hand the chair over to you, Mayor Davis, please.
Yes, so I'm pleased to take this over so you can bring forward the resolution. You put it on the floor, please, Councilor Antosky.
Thank you, Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Carpenter. It's a long one. I've saved all my speaking for this. Permanent doubling of the
Sorry, should I time it?
federal gas tax. Whereas local infrastructure is a vital component of any municipality that improves the life of citizens across the city, and whereas strategic asset management helps the city manage our infrastructure assets and make better investment decisions, it also helps reduce risk so we can provide reliable and affordable services for our residents. And whereas Brantford City Council approved the 2017 Asset Management Plan, which includes $3 billion in public works, housing, parks and rec, tourism and Sanderson Center assets, and identifies a state of good repair backlog of $227.5 million based on the age, condition, and value of those assets. And whereas the value of the city's assets state of good repair backlog continues to grow, and whereas Brantford City Council approved a strategic asset management policy in 2019 that outlines the requirements, overall intentions, principles, and the framework that the city will follow when creating asset management plans. And whereas the city of Brantford, along with the majority of other cities across the country, have a significant capital repair and infrastructure deficit as described in the 2014 and 2017 asset management plans. And whereas municipalities require sustainable funding that often include alternative forms of revenue to fund infrastructure improvements, and whereas the federal gas tax fund is a permanent source of funding for municipal infrastructure that is predictable, long-term, and stable, that is helping Ontario's municipal governments address the infrastructure deficit while improving environmental sustainability and creating jobs and economic growth. And whereas the Association of Municipalities of Ontario administers the federal gas tax funding, and whereas the city uses federal gas tax funding to fund infrastructure projects that result in environmental benefits and greenhouse gas reductions such as roadworks, active transportation, which includes sidewalks and cycle facilities, energy management retrofits, transit, and many other programs. And whereas the 2019 to 2024 allocation agreement will see the city receiving $5.9 million in 2019, increasing to $6.4 million in 2023 from the federal gas tax fund. And in 2019, the city had a one-time doubling of the amount of funding to be applied to eligible citywide capital projects. And whereas this funding has helped the city reduce the infrastructure deficit from where it would be without the support of the federal gas tax fund. Now, therefore, be resolved, A, that while the 2019 allocation was doubled on a one-time basis, that City Council acknowledges the importance of federal gas tax funds for the citizens of Brantford, and B, that the City of Brantford Council makes a request to MP McColman and any other federal candidates that emerge for the permanent doubling of the federal gas tax funding allocation, and C, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to MP McColman and any candidates representing Brantford Brant in the 2019 federal election. D, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the County of Brant, and E, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Basically, as a member of FCM, this is as a board member of FCM, this is one of the initiatives that they are pushing quite fiercely. We know as a municipality how difficult it is to get the money that we need for our infrastructure projects, and it was FCM that was originally successful in having this pushed down directly to the local governments. So they made their big step last year, or in 2019, to double it, and now they're making the move for the permanent doubling. So they've been quite successful in a number of their initiatives recently. They've gained a lot of strength, and I think that by being members, we have a voice at that table, and I think that we need to take part in pushing this and continuing to make sure that we're putting pressure and continuing to gather every penny we can directly.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. So, any discussion on this item 6.3? Councillor Van Tilburg.
I just want to be clear, because there's the wording which is talking about a fund, and then there's the title which talks about the gas tax. Are we talking about a tax or the fund, or are we actually talking about both? Are we talking about doubling the tax or doubling the amount of money the municipality receives? So I think if you're talking about doubling the tax, the public are going to go, are you crazy? Whereas I think if they're understanding that the idea is for the for the federal government to be funding the municipality in a greater amount of money, which would actually, hopefully reduce the burden on their municipal taxes, they might understand that. But right now, the wording and the titles don't, to me, mesh. So if I could just get some clarification on what that intent actually is on the funding and how it's accumulated.
Councillor Antosky, please clarify that for us.
Thank you. It is doubling the allocation from the federal government to the local municipalities. So doubling the money that we currently get through the federal gas tax fund.
Any other discussion? Yes, Councillor Carpenter.
I was happy to second this resolution, but it's still a Band-Aid. The gas tax is a Band-Aid. Municipalities all across this country are crying that they have an asset problem, that they're not getting enough funding to deal with their infrastructure needs. And to me, the best resolution ever come by was the 1% increase in the HST that went directly to the municipalities. Every municipality in the country would have enough funding to fund their infrastructure out of that simple 1%. There wouldn't be any of this pull it back, give it back nonsense that goes on with gas tax and all other kinds of grants, and the bureaucracy that's involved in that system. That apply for this grant, apply for that grant, fill out this form. That is a waste of taxpayers' money, huge waste. Why? Just so that the federal and provincial masters can say, "Look what we did for you," or "Look what we didn't do for you." In our case, it just drives me crazy sitting around this table for as long as I have. The solution is quite simple. But they want to have the control of saying they did something for you. They want to be there for that photograph where they're snipping the ribbon and they can smile saying, "Look what I did. I gave you somebody else's money." And they want to look at it like it was their money. It just drives me crazy that we even do this stuff. The 1% HST increase directly contributed back to the municipalities would fund all their infrastructure needs now and forever. There would never be another request. There wouldn't be all these campaigns about infrastructure. There wouldn't be all this nonsense that's going out there with our MPPs or MPs saying how much they would like to help. And if you didn't manage infrastructure properly, then it would be the own municipality's fault. I remember years ago when I was on the Public Utilities Commission, it used to drive me crazy that the municipalities that didn't maintain their water systems, and their water systems were falling apart, they got all the grants. And we maintain a healthy water system, we got no grants because our system was in good shape. And so the system of grants rewards those that are inefficient. It doesn't give everybody put everybody in the same playing field and say, all right, let's see who can manage the most efficient. I'm supporting this, but this isn't the answer. The answer was already put before us, and nobody wants to accept that. No one has the courage to do that at the federal or the provincial level. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I just want to say a few words before we hand it back to you for final comments, Councillor Antosky. I wanted to commend you, having served on the AMO board. This is in the finest tradition of what you do as either FCM or an AMO board member. And it's a group of municipalities across the country working together to affect positive change for all of us. And I commend you for bringing it forward. I'm quite happy to support it. And if you'd like the final words of comment before we call the vote.
Thank you. Yes, I was going to say I don't disagree that the HST was a good solution. It did not gain or garner the support it needed anywhere. So this is what we've got now, and this is a step forward, and this provided us millions of dollars last year and millions of needed dollars, and we need lots more, but this is a step forward. So I agree it's a part of the puzzle, but this is what we've got, and we need to support it.
I'll call the vote then.
Item 6.3, permanent doubling of the federal gas tax is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Celeste, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, and Councillor Wall.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to take back the chair?
I thought that just happened automatically.
Thank you. Item 6.4, Councillor Carpenter, could you please move this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Utley that staff be directed to prepare necessary bylaws to have an all-way stop control installed at the intersection of Johnson Road and Stevenson Road.
Any discussion? Call vote.
Item 6.4, all-way stops at Johnson Road and Stevenson Road is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Van Tilburg, and Councillor Wall.
Councillor Carpenter, 6.5 is also yours.
Thank you. It's moved by myself and again seconded by Councillor, only because the ward mate's in the chair. The staff is directed to prepare a necessary bylaw for an all-way stop control installed at the intersection of Johnson Road and Hansford Drive. Thank you.
Any discussion? Call the vote, please.
Item 6.5, all-way stops at Johnson Road and Hansford Drive is approved on a recorded vote of 8-1. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Weaver, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sless, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, and Councillor Wall. Those against, Councillor Van Tilburg.
Okay, members of the committee, there are 3 notices of motion for tonight's meeting. One was included in our agendas, and copies of the other 2 are before you on your desks. The first one is 7.1, Councillor Weaver.
Thank you. It's graffiti abatement.
And 7.2, Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 3-way stop signs at Kent Road and Deer Park Road, and 7.3, 4-way stop signs at Spring Street and Jarvis Street.
Thank you all. This meeting is adjourned.
All right.